All right, so we'll get started. This topic today is, in my opinion, one of the more important topics you can ever listen to about your legal career and your career in general, actually. I've watched people, what I'm going to talk about today, I've watched two people that I know actually with a lot of the skills and what I'm going to talk about specifically today become billionaires. I've seen other people become worth tens of millions of dollars, really just based on the characteristic I'm going to talk to you about today. And I've also seen attorneys become incredibly successful based on what I'm going to talk about today. So this presentation is about getting a position and how you can get positions and overcome any thing that you think may be limiting you in your job search or in your career right now. But it's actually about a lot more. And I'm going to talk to you about the thing that I've seen that makes attorneys, other people extremely successful in life and in their job search, their careers, whatever you're seeking to do. I really like this presentation. I've given this talk before several times, not for BCG, but in motivational seminars. And so I think you'll enjoy this topic today, and I hope you get a lot out of it. So I'd also encourage you to take notes during this because you may see a lot of things that you can change and you're doing wrong. And hopefully this will also inspire you quite a bit. I think that I've actually gotten feedback on what I'm going to talk about today that it's helped a lot of people change the course of the direction of their career. So I'm excited about this topic. This is a live webinar. What that means is I will, at the end, we'll take a short break for about a minute after the presentation and 1 minute or two, and then we'll come back and I will answer whatever questions anyone has that they'd like me to talk about. And it doesn't have to be related to this at all. As you're probably aware, there's a lot of emphasis in the legal profession, and a lot of people feel limited or empowered by their qualifications, by the schools they go to, by how well they do there. There's other things that matter quite a bit. The practice area you're in can either sometimes it can limit you, and other times it can help you. But there's a lot more going on beneath the surface in the legal profession, a lot more. And people with the best qualifications often don't succeed. Many times they do, more often than not. People with the worst qualifications in terms of where they went to law school or the practice area they're in or where they're practicing often don't succeed, but many times they succeed well far beyond what people with the top academic qualifications do. And so it's interesting to me because honestly, most successful attorneys that I know, and I know lots of them, but some of the most successful attorneys didn't go to the top law schools, didn't even do well in law school, many times were unemployed for months when they got out of law school, but they have exactly what I'm going to talk about today. And I'll give you some examples of people that I've seen the opposite happen to, and you may see in your own background things that you believe that you could, if you change the way you think about things, it could really make a major difference in what happens to you in your career in life. And when I say your career in life, it could be your fitness or your significant other. It could be what you want to do with helping people or donating money to, it could be anything. But once you understand what I'm going to talk about, it's just incredibly important because people, it doesn't really matter. It does matter, but ultimately it doesn't matter how happy you're going to be or how successful you're going to be based on your academic qualifications. It matters how you think about your life and your career. And I've seen very talented attorneys rise very quickly because they knew how to position themselves. And I've seen so many very smart, brilliant people derail their careers by not doing certain things and by not having the right mindset. So I'm going to talk about what that mindset is today. And I just find this topic just so interesting because I've seen in my career, I've seen so many people succeed that you never would have imagined could succeed. I've seen people, this one woman I know went to Southwestern and didn't even went there at night and then never worked for anyone. And now she's going around meeting with presidents of countries and immigration attorneys. It's just absolutely incredible what people can do when they're motivated and they have self-confidence and a lot of things I'm going to talk about. So first I'm going to talk about a story, but before I do, there's this quote I love from Napoleon Hill, and it's from the book Think and Grow Rich, and it says, if you think you're beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't know if you like to win, but if you can't, it's almost certain you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost. For out in the world we find success begins with the fellow's will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win a prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger, faster man, but sooner or late, the man who wins is who thinks he can. So I love this quote just because it really shows what your mind can do. And if you believe in yourself, what you can achieve. And most attorneys, probably I would say more than 60, 70% of them, don't believe in themselves enough. And because they don't believe in themselves and they don't set high goals for themselves, the things that they want to happen in their career never happen. And many times people just get beaten down. You have things happen to you, you don't get jobs, you don't get the grades you want, you're unemployed, you get fired. And people allow themselves to get beaten down by things instead of just thinking everything that happens is a lesson. And one other point I want to make just before we start is people react in two ways when something negative happens to them or they have some sort of learning experience. So some people end up, they take that, what's happening as a setback. They allow it to make them depressed. They cower. They don't want to get rejected again or whatever happened. They think that they have to limit themselves in their career and their life. And sometimes they withdraw. Sometimes they move to small, they do all sorts of things. And when bad things happen, so some people get depressed and they get sad and they feel defeated. That's one response. The other response that I think is the most interesting, that I've seen the most successful people do just all the time. I run into people like this regularly, every month. But the most successful people do is they will use the bad things that happen to them, their setbacks, as rocket fuel, meaning that will make them, instead of them feeling badly about themselves, they'll take that and say, hey, this bad stuff happened, or I had this setback, or I didn't do well at this, and I'm going to try even harder. And it's going to make me mad. And I'm mad. I'm going to push myself harder and harder. And this is what the most successful attorneys do. It's what people that become billionaires do. It's what people do in every profession that become the most successful. It's not just about your technical skills. It's about how motivated you are, whether it's winning a case or whatever. That's getting clients. It's just how motivated. So everyone has bad things happen to them, everyone. And every story, whether it's about Abraham Lincoln losing every political race and then becoming president, every story, any great story, whether it's a movie or anything, always is about someone where bad things happen to them and then they're pushed into a corner, they're marginalized, and then somehow they emerge from that as the hero. And that's what everyone wants to hear. And people that do that, it's always because of their will and their ability to take negative things that happen to them and turn those into things that will make them try harder next time, and they'll learn from that and they'll overcome it. And that's what people need to do with their careers. And everybody has setbacks. Most attorneys, I would say 90% of them lose their jobs at some point, or something happens. Maybe their firm goes out of business, or maybe they who knows? But people lose jobs and people get asked to leave, or people get into situations where they feel they have to leave, even though they might not have been fired. So people lose jobs. Bad things happen to people all the time, and people overcome them and do well. And some people don't. So you have to think about what's happened to you that's negative, and are you using that to be sad? Are you using that to think you're only can be one type of attorney and you're never going to make enough money and you're never going to have enough success? Or are you taking all this bad stuff or things that you think are negative and using it as a motivational tool? And that's what you should do. And that's what the most successful people do. And so I want you just to keep that in mind as I talk about what I'm going to talk about today. Several years ago, I was in my office and this incredible attorney appeared in my inbox. And he had a degree from, I think it was a master's degree from Caltech or MIT. I don't remember what it was, but it was in physics. And he'd gone to a very good law school. And he was first in his class, which is great. And not only that, but he was working right now at one of the top law firms in the world. And he was also in a practice area that was just absolutely white hot. So he was a patent attorney with a hard sciences background with a master's degree from like one of the top one or two programs for physics in the country, I believe. And there was the back then in 2000 or 2001, I'm not sure what year this was, the demand for patent attorneys was much more than it is right now because there simply weren't enough of them. And there was so much technology and things happening, and there weren't enough patent attorneys, especially ones like this. And so the demand was just absolutely incredible. And again, this is in 2000. So the numbers I'm telling you right now are probably double more than that than they were back then. But I had another candidate he was maybe two years out of law school, and a law firm made him an offer, and then they just made the offer, and then I went, and then he said he wanted a bonus and to start. And so they came back just right away and they said, we'll give you a $50,000 bonus just to start and accept the offer. And right when he accepted the offer, they were willing to do it. And no one would do that. They don't do that even now, even $100,000. I just haven't heard anything like this in so long. But this was the best legal market, I guess it was in 2000, that it really had ever been in history because you had lots of internet companies starting, people were investing money. And then there's just a very good market. And he wasn't even the attorney that got this $50,000 offer, starting bonus offer, wasn't even 10% as strong as the one whose resume I was staring at. And the candidate whose resume I was staring at was at a major law firm in Silicon Valley, a really good one, and just extraordinary. And he wanted me to help him with moving to another firm. So at that point in history, the market was so strong that I estimated he would get, if he any firm he applied to, he would get interviews. I just didn't think there was any question. And I also believed that firms would be competing very aggressively to hire him. But as I started studying his resume, I got a little nervous because when a recruiter is working on behalf of a law firm, and law firms are the ones that hire them, if law firms are making a candidate an offer and the candidate doesn't accept, then the law firm kind of feels like the recruiter may have been wasting their time. It doesn't mean that the candidate has to accept every offer, of course, but law firms want to believe when it's a really good candidate that they may not be wasting their time and that the recruiter is on their side and so forth. I was thinking about how to approach this, and I was worried that if I sent him to too many places that it didn't create too many issues because I felt like it would create issues, problems. And but when the market's really strong and a recruiter has a really good candidate like that, they often need to be really careful because they could upset the clients, and the clients don't like things handled in a wrong way because it costs law firms a lot of money to bring in people to interview. So just imagine today you have partners that bill out at $3,000 an hour. It's very expensive for law firms to interview people. It takes a lot of administrative work. And then the people that are interviewing are often very valuable. This is not $800 an hour. It's $3,000 plus per hour. And 5 or 6 hours is not 5,000, it's more 25,000. And law firms will often bring people back multiple times during the recruiting process and taking the attorney out to lunch or dinner while evaluating again whether or not they want to hire them. Because there's also a lot of time debating about whether the attorney is the right fit, people have to talk about them. I realized that if I sent him to too many firms that he wasn't interested in, I would be wasting a lot of money of the firm. So just think it's not 20,000, it's probably easily $50,000 that it would cost a firm now to do something like that. So recruiters need to have credibility with law firms. It's one reason that it's good to use a recruiter if you have the right background, because if a recruiter tells a law firm that it would be a good idea to extend an offer, that they should, the firm knows that the candidate's very likely to accept it. So if a candidate says, I really want to work at this firm, and then the recruiter comes back and says it's their first choice, which is a nice thing you can do that a candidate can't often do on their own, then the law firm's much more likely to extend an offer, very likely compared to the opposite. So that's a nice thing that recruiters can do is they can actually make it, if you sell the candidate to the law firm enough and tell them that the real person really wants to work there, it's their first choice, then the law firm's much more likely to extend an interview. And so I always was very successful and still am in recruiting when I can tell a law firm that an offer is going to be accepted, extended, and helps people get jobs much more so than if they were doing things on their own and just said, "Hey, thanks for interviewing me." And so firms trust you in the process, and law firms also want clarity when they invest in things. The best recruiters can also position a candidate as wanting to interview with a firm just because of certain things in their background match what their goals are and that sort of thing. But this particular candidate, there was some issues, and I didn't meet him face to face until weeks later. But I did spend a lot of time with him, at least a couple hours on the phone, talking about what he needed, what kind of firm he wanted, and trying to make sure I could position him in the right way. And he was also going through a divorce, and he seemed very interested in talking about that. And it's not something that I mind talking about, but he was actually just as interested in that his job search. And so people often make mistakes. I mean, he was moving to another part of the country where his wife wasn't. And wait a second. Huh. And that was one thing that was going on. And then after days of speaking with him on the phone, I believe that we finally settled on a firm that I really liked for him. So I was only going to send him to one firm, and that's the only one we're going to approach. And I say firm because I felt like he would get an offer from this firm, and I just didn't think he was literally one of the strongest candidates I'd ever seen. And it was first in his class in law school, and then just crazy. And so here's what happens. It's interesting. And this is an aside. It's not exactly completely related to everything we're talking about, but there's something that's unusual that I've noticed with law firms and the best candidates. I've worked with a few candidates like this with perfect records and that were incredible being the band. And it's always interesting to watch what happens on the market when someone like that comes out. And it's funny because when the best candidates come out, I had a woman not too long ago from Sullivan and Cromwell that was like first in her college, like this huge college of like 25,000 people in her class, and then went to Yale Law School. And in law firms were literally hesitant to interview her. So what happens is if there's a big demand in a practice area, a law firm will often interview people that are strong, but not exceptional. And average candidates for like a typical candidate for an AmLaw 100 law firm, for example, will get, if they went to a decent law school and they're working in other big firms, will often get very quick responses from firms within 30 minutes or so. The firms often, I mean, not that fast, but sometimes will start calling and trying to get information, trying to schedule interviews. But what happens when someone comes along that's incredibly stellar, that has qualifications, even in the best law firms, there are people that are the best that have qualifications in whatever office the firm is in that are better than the attorneys there. It's someone that went to Yale Law School at the top of their class, is coming from one of the top two or three firms in the country, and then say hypothetically this person was looking in Silicon Valley, their qualifications are probably better than the majority of candidates in those firms. So if you get a candidate like that, what happens is the law firms, it's funny. You would think the opposite were true. So if you have a candidate who's really good, you would think that everybody wants to interview them. But what happens is the law firms will often not respond. Like they won't respond. And I think the reason is because they don't want to look too desperate. They don't want to feel like the person's wasting their time. They're not even sure the person will come to work there, even though they would love to have that person. They being confronted with that sort of person might make them they're often very hesitant to move that person forward. I had a candidate like that also in early 2000, which was literally the hottest market it had ever been for corporate attorneys in the country. And this person wanted to go to work in San Diego, and literally the market was just completely on fire. It was anybody with a pulse, like even coming from like a five-person law firm, could get an interview with a top law firm in San Diego, like an AM law firm, because there was so much demand for corporate. And this guy had been like Harvard Law Review, was at a top law firm in Boston, a very good law firm, and had incredible corporate experience. And I approached all these great firms in San Diego, which isn't a huge market, and no one would interview him until I called these firms and was like, he really would like to work there, a couple of them. That's the only time they interview him. They didn't interview when I just approached the law firms with contacting them with letters and that sort of thing. I called after I sent him out. I called the law firm he was interested in. They didn't respond initially and explained that he really looked like the perfect match for them. Explained that I'd spoken extensively with him. We'd spent all this time together. We talked about all the different firms he could work at, and this is the one he was most interested in. And so the law firm, once they heard that, which is a great thing that a recruiter can do, and it works, something that when you have a really good recruiter, that recruiter can get you into places you normally wouldn't because they have a relationship and they can sell you in ways that other people can't. So the firm agreed to talk to the candidate and for an entire day, they brought him out to interview with them. And then they had followed by dinner and something law firms typically will do just a screening interview first to make sure the person's okay. They won't invest all that time. Here, they didn't do that. They just brought him out for a full round of interviews and never did the screening interview. And screening interviews are actually pretty important because a law firm, they're going to take a look at you and they're basically saying, is this a person we'd be comfortable with having in our office and having clients see? Does this person seem like they've got a decent head on their shoulders? That's the purpose of a screening interview. It's basically a way for them to see if you look okay before investing time. So what happened that was interesting is so this candidate went in to interview and I assumed he might even receive an offer in the interview. And after I sent this candidate right initially, they were very nice. My phone calls were getting returned very quickly. They were asking about other candidates to be nice that I didn't think they would interview, but they were retaining like they had an interest in them. But after this candidate went into interview, I assumed they would be very interested and call me right away. And I didn't receive a call back until several hours later. And this is a ritual. If you send a law firm a candidate, then I'd like to talk to the firm. I try to just get them to talk to me about nothing like this, the recruiting people, just to establish a bond. So you literally will talk about the exercise classes they like, what books are they reading, when are they taking a vacation. And then people, when they get comfortable with you, they're more likely to share information. And then if the candidate was good enough, then the law firm is really recruiting when speaking with you, and they want to be nice. So they'll say good things so you'll say good things about them to the candidate, like why they're a nice firm, why the people are nice, and because a recruiter inside of a law firm knows that the recruiter can influence if the candidate's going to take a job or not. So anyway, so I'd spent a lot of time talking to the hiring partner of this firm, a couple hours. I don't know why we were talking so long, but he had a lot of time on his hands. And I guess I knew people that he'd known and practiced with and that sort of thing. And we agreed I'd grab lunch with him if I was in that part of the country. And later in the day, after that interview, I received a call back, not from this partner, but from his secretary. And she said that the partner wanted me to tell you that we're not moving forward with this candidate. And I didn't expect that at all. I just expected almost like an immediate offer, and I was taken back, like what was happening. And the secretary didn't give me any reason and no details, no clarity, nothing. And so this was shocking to me. I didn't expect this to happen. And again, this person, any law firm would want to hire this person and this was in Silicon Valley because his qualifications were so good. Just putting him on the website just putting him on the website would be something that clients would just jump up and down about and make the law firm look very good. But all this I was rejection. No one told me what was happening. And so over the next several days, I tried calling this partner to find out what was going on. He wasn't taking my calls, or maybe he was busy, but I wasn't able to talk to him like I was before. And the candidate kept asking me when he was going to be receiving an offer. I told him I didn't have any final news yet. I didn't want to let him down because I felt like I could save the situation. So that's also something a good recruiter can do. Someone can get rejected by a firm, and then a good recruiter can step in and actually make the offer and the placement. And what I'm going to tell you may seem a bit unethical, but I just want you to understand what a good recruiter can do. So a good recruiter can take candidates from the jaws of death and get them hired when they're about to be rejected, or even sometimes when they're rejected. And this is something that only the very best recruiters can do, the ones with there's very few people that can do this. I'm not trying to brag, but it's something that a lot of people don't do because when their candidate gets rejected, they take it personally and they don't think about ways they can make things happen. So having real rapport with a law firm is important. And if you have that sort of rapport, that it's good. They will hire people that you recommend, even if they're not sure. And in this case, I really need to know what's going on. So after several days, I finally tracked this guy down. He couldn't ignore me anymore because I'd probably called him like 10 times. And I told him, you can't reject this person. He's exactly what you've been looking for. He's everything, the perfect qualifications. And I tried to talk to him about the candidate for like at least 15 minutes. He said, I know he's got these great qualifications. And I got him to agree to bring him back, this same candidate, for another full day of interviews after he'd been rejected with different people in the firm. He said, maybe I'll try some other people and see what happens. And I got him to agree to do that because saying maybe these other people like him. It was very unusual because then they had to fly this candidate back out, but I wasn't giving up. And I didn't want to let go because this candidate wanted to work at this firm. They did the technical type of work our clients and he wanted to work on. And I believed that the firm would be making a mistake by walking away from him. Now, one thing I also want to bring to your attention that's important, a patent attorney, and it's not like this for all patent attorneys, but patent attorneys essentially what they do is it's not a very social job. You work on patents and you work in an office. You don't need to talk to a lot of people. Clients don't need to talk to you. You can work almost anonymously many times. Now, this isn't for all patent attorneys and people will disagree with me, but it's one of the most solitary positions in the legal profession because you're essentially working on these kind of science problems and doing them independently and then getting feedback from people that you're working for many times. And that's the job. And it's not something where if you have great social skills, that's fine. If you don't, it doesn't really matter. And that's the type of job. So this is the job he was interviewing for. And the type of work is more dependent on your technical skill than anything. So he obviously had the technical skills. So I was curious what's going on. And so as the conversation was winding down and he was going to bring him back, he asked me if I've ever met him. And I said, no, I've never met him. And he said, you should meet him. And meeting him would tell me why maybe there were some issues. And this is the way people talk. So people won't say something negative about something. They won't often say something negative because they don't want to come back to them, but they'll say something like, you should meet him. So this particular attorney was someone who was mentioned in legal newspapers all the time. This number is well over 2 million at the time. This kind of attorney would probably be making 7 million, 6 million or something now. The compensation's a lot more. So just imagine, I guess, attorney telling me this sort of attorney telling me this and who I was talking to, someone that would be making definitely right now probably over $5 million a year. He was leaving me something to think about. So I realized that I needed to pay attention and meet this candidate. And so what I did, I agreed to, I'd never seen a picture of this candidate. I don't know why. He was working in the office of a New York law firm in Silicon Valley, and they didn't have pictures for their attorneys for whatever reason at that point in time. And it's actually funny. They didn't used to have in the late 1990s and so forth. They often didn't have pictures on websites, but all I'd ever done is talk to this attorney. And at that point, everything I knew was just based on my conversations with him and his resume. And because this very important attorney told me I should meet with him, I decided to do. I called him and told him I would fly him to Los Angeles and host him in a hotel, take him out to dinner for a day, take him out to dinner, and so we could chat and get to know each other because I really wanted to see for myself what this guy was like. And I needed to understand what this partner was talking about. And this isn't something that most recruiters will do. As a matter of fact, I'm the only recruiter that I've ever known that's done this. I'm sure other ones do. But I used to fly candidates from all over the country. If I was representing someone that was trying to get a job in Atlanta and wasn't getting a job in Atlanta or having issues, or maybe just a really good candidate, I would offer to fly them to Los Angeles to meet with me. I even had people, it was funny, I had people like flying from Chicago, which is a 4-hour flight. I'd meet them in the airport and then put them back on a flight. So I used to do this because when I would meet my candidates, I'd always get much better results than if I didn't meet them. And when you get behind someone, it can say you've met them and that you can get the person inspired, then really good things can happen. And I remember one year it was something like, and I'm sure that you've worked with recruiters or know recruiters and things, but I remember one year when I had met with candidates, like the majority of them, like 80% of them I'd placed, and then the ones I didn't meet, I didn't. So there's some sort of energy that happens between people when people meet, and it can be very important for recruiters. And so I was doing the right thing doing this. And just so many people that I've met really been able to make a big difference in how they're placed and the results I get. And the people that I don't, a lot of times I don't. I'll never forget the moment when this particular candidate, so I flew him in, he showed up in my office. I'll never forget when he walked in. It was amazing. He had literally the longest hair that I'd ever seen. It must have taken him at least a couple of years to grow it. It was past his buttocks. And he had so much hair that he had, when you look at him in the face, he had barrettes and things that were holding it up to keep it out of his eyes. And it was very unusual. It's not the kind of thing you typically see, even in Southern California. I'd never seen someone with that much hair. He just tons and tons of hair. And then when he was sitting next to me, he was coming across as very depressing. He wanted to continue talking about this divorce instead of his what was going on in his divorce and what his wife is doing and how all these different things. And he was very interested in his divorce. But I really couldn't get over how much hair he had. I kept thinking how this was going to come across in law firm interviews, and because it wasn't making a great impression. This is not the sort of thing that attorneys will typically, it's not normal in law firms and even many times outside of law firms and others for people to have that much hair. And so I didn't say anything for a while. I didn't say anything until after we finished eating lunch, and because it was a big deal. And I mean, a second here. And I didn't want to upset him because sometimes men can be extremely sensitive about their hair. I had my best friend, not really that important, but in high school, I was visiting him at my home in Michigan, and he'd lost a little bit of hair on the back of his head, not a lot. And I tapped the back of his head and said, "It looks like you're getting a little bald spot." And he got incredibly upset and turned around and started trying to punch me in the face. I was blocking his punches, but just incredibly upset and known him for since I've been 5 years old. And at this point, I might have been like 20 or something. And I realized that I guess men can be very sensitive about their hair. But anyway, so let me get back to Sarah. But anyway, so I realized that this can be something that men take very personally. I was trying to be very careful about saying something to this guy about his hair because I knew could be an emotional topic. And I asked him finally at dessert, do you think it might be easier for you to get a job if you cut your hair? And he did exactly what I was afraid of. He went into this kind of verbal rampage, said there was no way he was going to cut his hair. He talked about that he was entitled to be his own person. Establishment, he didn't have to do what other people wanted. And he was very upset and he kind of rationalized it and talked about it and said all these different things. I don't even remember everything he said, but he talked for several minutes about it. And he told me it had taken him 3 years to grow his hair, and which was about the same time he'd been working in his current law firm. And he explained that he'd not always looked like this, meaning when he got his job at the law firm, he had normal hair and he continued to grow it out for several years. I don't remember if he was losing his job or what was happening, but he was very unhappy. And I think as he grew his hair longer and longer, the law firm probably didn't like it too much. And again, if he had looked like he did earlier with normal hair, I don't think he would have had a very difficult time getting the job that I'd sent him out. The depression over his divorce is obviously that's the kind of thing you never want to talk about in interviews. This is just an aside, but I want to make sure everyone understands this. When you go out in interviews, you don't want to talk about your personal life to the extent you can. You can talk about your interests, you like playing soccer on the weekends, whatever, but you can't get too personal about things. You have to be very careful. And you can talk sometimes about, I don't know, your husband or your wife, you can mention things like that. But in general, you have to be professional and make sure you don't talk about negative things. Now, the biggest thing that I just want to make sure you understand when you go on an interview, anytime you say something negative about yourself, that's not good. So you don't talk about being depressed. You don't talk about getting divorced. You don't talk about having any issues, really any problems, because attorneys, when you're going out on an interview, you're expected to represent yourself and to be the kind of person that is promoting themselves in a positive way, not making themselves negative, not building themselves up. And what that means essentially is if you were an attorney and you were representing a client, you wouldn't go and say negative things about that client to the other side. You would be very positive about that client. So when you're going on an interview, you have to say positive things about yourself. And you really, when you get into the office as well, you have to be very careful, especially as an associate, of not saying anything negative about yourself and not giving people too much personal information. Because if you do that, they will use it against you. So this guy should not have been talking about his divorce. His biggest issue was his hair and how he saw himself. So he told me that if the law firm had been hesitating about making him an offer and they wanted him to come back because of his hair, he didn't want to look at that firm. He wanted to look at other firms. And so at that point, I sat down with him in the afternoon and we discussed at least 15 more firms that he was interested in speaking with. I knew all of these firms would want to speak to him, all 15 firms if I sent him. But I also, and he was qualified to work at them. So I decided I would help him get interviews at these 15 firms. And it was the law firm's issue. I decided that if they wanted to discriminate against him because of his hair, there was nothing that I could really do about it. It was going to be their issue and not mine. So over the following weeks, he didn't go back. I don't think he went back on the interview with the law firm that I got him the second interview with. He was mad that I think that I implied that they might have had something to do with his hair. I didn't say that, but I think that he felt that. I wouldn't have said, because the law firm didn't say that, I wouldn't have said anything about it. But he went out on these 15 interviews and was rejected for every single one of those firms. And as he was being rejected, I was trying to be nice to him. I didn't want to get his confidence down. So I didn't tell him about every rejection. I just kept allowing him to go out on interviews. I tried to prep him for the interviews. I asked him not to talk about his divorce, but I got him interviews then at even some smaller firms, and he was rejected by those too. So every firm he was going out on was rejecting him. None of them were saying anything about his hair, like they weren't. But I knew that this hair, again, this just wasn't, it's not normal. It's okay, people can be different. But no matter how exceptional he was on paper, keeping in mind that this is one of the best candidates that I've seen in my entire legal career because he graduated first in his class from an Ivy League law school, had a technical degree or an advanced technical degree from, I don't remember if it was Caltech or MIT. It might have been Caltech actually, which is just insane. You get a master's degree and then an undergraduate degree. It's just exceptional, incredible. But just this issue with his appearance, just one thing, and law firms couldn't get past. Maybe it's a little depressing, but that doesn't matter as much in that sort of world I'm talking about. This is again a job where someone doesn't have client contact. They're just expected to sit in an office, except basically. But how does that long hair, how does that impact how other attorneys see him in the office, what their brand is? I don't know. But this is a crazy example, but think about this. This is someone who felt it was very important that he do this to be different. I've had a lot of people like this throughout the years that just want to do something different. And then they put things on their resume that make them very difficult to employ. I had one guy, this is fairly recently, it was within the past couple of years, and he was in New York and he'd gone to a really good law school like Columbia and then had been an undergrad, gone to Yale or Harvard or something as an undergraduate and done really well there too. And then had gotten a job with a large law firm after law school. And then had worked there and done well. And then he'd gotten very interested in this group it was a group for gay men. He got interested in gay rights. And he started writing all these papers and articles. And then he put on his resume that he'd done all this gay pro bono work. And again, there's nothing wrong with this. This is all good stuff. And people should go and be part of groups and write and things that interest them. But the problem is his resume mentioned, if you read it, it was one page, and I counted like 26 or 28 times that it was talking about gay papers, gay pro bono, gay associations, like all this stuff. And so the resume had more to do with things for gay rights and so forth, and than it had to do with working in a law firm. And so this, again, this is not something I could say anything about, but he wasn't getting interviews and he was very upset. He didn't understand what was going on. And if he had just cleaned that up, meaning he didn't have to talk about it, he could talk about it, but he didn't have to talk about it everywhere. He didn't have to put it in under his experience at his job. He didn't have to put it all these different places. And it's no different than if somebody wants to list, you wouldn't list the fact that you were part of the Christian association or the Jewish association or the whatever. You wouldn't list that 26 times on your paper, on your resume. It's not that people are prejudicial against people being gay. It's not that people are prejudicial against Christians or Jews or Muslims or the law firms. That's not the issue. The issue is when you're drawing attention, when something you're drawing so much attention to it that it takes the place of what you're really trying to do. Meaning you want to work in a law firm, you want to work on behalf of their clients, you want to whatever. And that's what's important. It's not the people are discriminated against. I don't care if someone wants to whatever they list on their resume, but you have to downplay it because your resume needs to be more about that. And so this guy's hair was something that was drawing too much attention. It would be no different if he listed 26 times that it's just your resume and you as an attorney, people need to be, that's what needs to matter. This is what happened. So this guy didn't want to play by the rules. The rules said that he had to look, his hair was too long. And because of this, he didn't get any jobs. And it was very unfortunate because his background was so strong. And he might have been able to get hired as well if maybe he could have gotten back that if he had a better attitude. But as he kept going out in interviews, he was getting angrier and angrier. So he got to the point where he wasn't getting jobs. And so he went out on interviews. He was defensive and angry. And then he was doing even worse in his interviews. And then at one point, it got to the point where he'd been rejected so many times that he told me he was contemplating suicide. And it was just, and anyway, it was very heartbreaking to watch someone like that unravel because he had so much potential. And a couple months later, after he burned through all these firms and hadn't gotten any jobs, and I think up to this point he was unemployed, he said I might consider cutting my hair. And there wasn't much I could do at that point because he'd interviewed with almost all the firms in the region that he wanted to work in, which was Silicon Valley, and there wasn't much more I could do. And so he dropped off the map. He lost his job or quit his job. I don't remember what happened. And he ended up doing something else besides the practice of law. And it was one of these things where I was curious. I kept searching online over the years to see what he was doing. And then eventually I saw that he had let his bar license become inactive or whatever. And just a tragedy because you take someone that's perfectly suited for the legal profession, and then just because of making these mistakes, no one's hiring them. And it's no different like the guy I was talking to you about that listed if you did a word search on his resume, you saw the word gay on one page, resume 26 times. And people do this not just for sexual orientation, they'll do it for religious groups, they'll do it for racial groups, they'll do it for interest in things that have nothing to do with their practice area. Like sometimes I'll see it with someone is working as a corporate attorney in a big law firm. And then if you look at their resume, it might say entertainment 26 times or have things to do with entertainment. And you can tell this person's interested in entertainment. They're not interested in practicing corporate law. So you have to look the part, your resume has to look the part. And in this particular guy's case, he didn't cut his hair. And the guy that had gay on his resume 26 times, didn't get jobs, even though he should have. And again, nothing wrong with people having long hair, nothing wrong with people liking to be part of these associations. But if you want to work in law firms, you have to often play the games that they're playing. There are certain rules. So here's the point. So anything that happens to you, you actually control what happens in your career. And people don't realize this, but you have agency. This person sabotaged his career, just like the guy I told you about that listed this 26 times. And this outcome was completely unnecessary and could have been avoided. It's just he could have fixed everything. All he had to do was get a haircut. That was it. And his life and career would have changed. He would have still been a lawyer. He would have been making a lot of money. He would have been in a law firm. And so what is the lesson to this? The lesson, and the most important lesson you really need to learn, is you're in charge of what happens to you. It's not someone else. It's all the decisions that you make determine what's going to happen to you in your career. Like you are making lots of decisions on an ongoing basis, and you may not even realize them. And you're going to choose what the world and your career is going to be. And this is what successful people do. Successful people don't say, hey, I hope I get this offer, or hey, I hope I get advanced. They choose what's going to happen to them and they make sure that what they want to happen to them actually happens. And it's extremely important. You have to have goals. You have to know where you're going. You have to believe in yourself and you have to take feedback from the world. And the world gives you feedback and tells you essentially what you need to do to be successful. It's very simple. You need to make all sorts of changes and do things on a daily basis, and you need to adjust what you're doing. You need to fix what's working and what's not working. It's very interesting. When I, years ago, 20 plus years ago, I was learning to fly planes. And back then, when I was learning, and I'm actually 25 years ago, satellites and things that were going inside of planes were new. And so it was not something that very few planes had at that point, and at least planes like small planes like Cessnas and things. And so what you would do is you would take off and you would fly towards, and you literally could, you're flying at night where you can't see anything, but you're flying towards these beacons, these things that are beeping. And you have to, if you're flying like through from Los Angeles to San Jose, you have to keep flying towards these beacons, and they become louder as you get towards them. And then once you get to a beacon, you can know where you are on a map. And then you fly to another beacon, and then that shows you where you are on a map. And so you're listening to these sounds, and you have these maps and things like these paper maps. But what's interesting, so when you're flying a plane, if you want to go from, it's probably not like this with satellites and stuff anymore, but if you want to go fly from Los Angeles to San Jose, which I used to do, you have to adjust yourself. The plane has to adjust itself like hundreds of thousands of times. You're constantly flying, and it's interesting. So it's the same thing with what happens to you. Like you have to make all these adjustments all the time. And so a lot of times people are always blaming their circumstances for what happens to them, and they think that the circumstances, and but the people who make things happen are the ones that look for the circumstances they want, and if they can't find those circumstances, they make them. So someone wants to be world famous torts lawyer or something, they figure out how to do it. People don't tap you and say, hey, you're going to be a world famous torts lawyer. People figure out how to do it. They figure out how to get in a position where they can learn how to do it. They figure out how to other people are doing it, and they make these circumstances. It's the same thing with anyone that becomes a billionaire or something. They will look for things and circumstances that can empower them to reach the kind of heights they want to. And they create circumstances. People don't just become billionaires by wanting to become billionaires. They become by creating circumstances. So you need to think about all this, because whatever point you are in your life right now, or however you believe that you're doing, and whatever levels of success that are happening to you, that is all just because of the just choices you're making, and you're in charge. No one else is creating your future for you, and no one else is going to create your future. You have to do it. In a law firm, by the way, no one is going to, if you're billing 300 hours a month, no one is going to tell you to stop billing 300 hours a month. if you're, they may, but usually they won't because the firm's making money off you if you're doing that. No one is going to force you to spend time going out trying to develop business. That's your choice. And if you do that, your life's going to change. There are attorneys, associates in firms all over the country, in big firms and small firms that dedicate a certain amount of their time to generating business. Those people become partners. Those people make millions of dollars a year. But the people that don't do that and create those circumstances will often have to go in house, or they'll not get a job that does well, and they'll just be on the fringes. They won't do as well. So people create their circumstances. Attorneys create their circumstances. Your career and the circumstances that you're experiencing are going to happen based on what you're what you choose to do. Like your decisions about the circumstance, your circumstances, what you choose to do is going to happen, and you're in charge, like no one else. And again, all these things about you being in charge in your career, what I'm going to be completely honest with you about is the most successful attorneys I know, and I know some pretty successful people, and attorneys with their own jets and things. And these are people that created their own circumstances, and usually they're not people that went often. That these people I'm thinking about are not didn't go to top law schools, and often didn't even get positions right when they came out. They created circumstances, and so anything you want to happen in your career and life, you can make happen. You don't have to be an attorney. You can do something else, but your career and your life are going to be shaped by the choices you make, and the world responds to what you're willing to do. So different people will do different things, and the world's going to respond to that in a different way. So I like this example because I see so many people that are unemployed, and they're unemployed when often they don't have to be, meaning they're unemployed, or actually a better word is underemployed. So I want you to think about this example. So you're doing what you're doing right now, whatever you're doing. And if someone were to come up to you and say that unless you got a job working as a bank teller in any part of the United States within the next 12 months, you're going to be executed on month 13, when I hit month 13. So if that happened to you, if someone came up to you and said that, you would do whatever you could to find a job. You would not leave any stone unturned. If it meant cutting your hair, you cut your hair. If it meant you had to move to another part of the country, you moved to the other part of the country. If it meant you had to apply to 10,000 jobs, you would apply to 10,000 bank teller jobs. And if it meant mailing your resume to every bank in the United States, if you could afford it, you would do that. Or calling every bank manager, if you had the time, you'd do that. If it meant you had to lose 100 pounds so you were more presentable, you would lose 100 pounds. If it meant you didn't speak good English and you needed to take lessons to speak better English, you would do that. Learning how to do math in your head, if you needed to learn, that was a qualification. You would do that smiling. So you'd learn to smile, and laughing at dumb jokes when you were interviewed. You would do that. You would do, if you were going to be executed, if you didn't become a bank teller, you would figure out how to do it, and you would make adjustments and do whatever you needed to do, just as someone flying a planes, making adjustments. You would make adjustments in order to survive and succeed and do well. And you would do unless you wanted to die, you would do whatever it took to get a job like that. And you would make sure that you were thorough, you left no stone unturned, and you would do whatever it took you to survive. And you would get the job as a bank teller. That's what people do. People try to survive. If someone puts a bag over your head and you don't have any air, you're going to rip it off. And people survive. It's just in our blood. That's what people do. Many people in the legal profession, a lot of them don't do whatever they need to succeed. They don't do what they need to get jobs. They sit around unemployed, which is absolutely crazy, because there are in the BCG database, this is crazy. I want you to understand how many law firms there are. So we're trying to find law firms of 5 or more people in BCG. And each month, we discover this is on our own. This is not using outside services that do it. This is our research staff looking for firms. And when looking for new firms, each week we're finding each month somewhere between 9 and 10,000 new law firms. They're popping up in Google Places. These are new law firms we're finding. And we don't even have a huge staff looking for new law firms. It's less than 5 people, but that's how many they're finding. Now they're using AI tools and all this sorts of thing to do it, but still 10,000 law firms each month that are new that we're finding, and they're all over. They're in every state. They're starting. What is that? That's 10, that's 3 to 30. That's how many is it? 300 a day? I don't know what that number. Yeah, 300 new law firms a day are starting. So think about that. Those are just new law firms. And then we have 100,000 plus existing ones. And so there's so many different places you could work. You could find places all over. And when people are looking for jobs, you can find better places to work. Think about if there's 100,000 plus law firms, think about how many potential clients there are. The number of that is even larger. There's so many different clients. There's probably millions of clients with businesses and things you could work for in the country. So there is so much opportunity. There are so many law firms. Most people that are looking for a position, they may look and they might say, okay, I'm going to work only in Washington, D.C., instead of realizing that there's 49 other states they could potentially work in doing their profession. And they don't get a job in Washington, D.C., they sit around unemployed. These ways of thinking about your career and opportunity are the most limiting things for you to, they're incredibly limiting. And this is how most people think. Most people are thinking all these limiting thoughts. They want to, whatever you want to do, pretty much within reason, you can do. You might not be able to get a job as a partner in the top 50 largest law firms in the country if you don't have a certain level of business and don't have a certain type of, but if you do have a certain level of business and you build yourself up, you can do it. Anybody can, but you have to have faith in yourself and you have to set goals and you have to not believe that you're limited. You're not limited. If you're unemployed, you're not limited. If you don't have business, you're not limited. If you've made mistakes and had failure after failure, you're not limited. Anybody can do whatever they want to. And you can do it if you believe in yourself and you go after something, whatever it is, in a way that you're going to succeed. And so many people, like this guy that cut his hair, think about it, he dropped out of the practice of law. I had another guy lose his job he was in the New York Washington, D.C. office of a New York law firm. He went to law school ranked maybe one or two in the country. I don't want to say it is because I don't want to give him away, but top two, three law school in the country. He did incredibly well there. He lost his job after 6 months and he applying for jobs. He gave up after not getting a couple interviews. I got him and became a criminal defense attorney defending people accused of drunk driving. Wow, that's someone that limited themselves based on bad things that happened to him, and only looked in Washington, D.C. for a job. Imagine looked in New York and Connecticut and all these different things would have easily been employed. You need to act when you're going after a job like someone who's going to be executed if you don't get it. No, you're not going to be, but you need to have that level of commitment and that level of belief in yourself and doing whatever it takes to get the job you're seeking. I had a horrible experience, which I hope you can learn from. When I was in law school, I just did an interview. I had been a asphalt contractor prior to, during high school, I had a business, and during college, I had a business, and even when I was in law school, I had a business, and it seemed to me almost silly to be talking to law firms when I could make as much money, more money in a summer than I could make working in a law firm, even a top law firm, for a year. So I'd go out in these interviews and I just did an interview. I talked about my asphalt business. I talked about what academic papers I'd written at the University of Chicago. It was very academic. And anyway, and so I didn't get most of the things I interviewed for. I didn't get. I had gotten a offer to work in a New York law firm during the summer after my second year of law school. The only reason I got that was because just by chance, the hiring partner of that firm had been best friends in college with my best friend's mother. And so I interviewed, we somehow made that connection in the interview. He called her up, and she just couldn't say enough nice things about me. And I ended up getting an offer to work in this New York law firm this summer. But if that hadn't happened, I think every single on-campus interview I went on, I didn't get a job. I was just talking about the wrong things. Resume was a mess. It had all this big blobs about asphalt, academic papers and things that no one was interested in. So I didn't do well. And I ended up getting the job at this firm. And then I somehow got a clerkship with a federal judge. And so I went and did this clerkship. I was clerking in a small town in Michigan, and which maybe an hour and a half outside of Detroit. And it was a part of the connected to Detroit, but it wasn't in Detroit. It was above a post office. And I did this job for It was supposed to be a 2-year job, and I did it for 1 year. And I was about to get fired, I quit. I didn't do well in the position, and I lost my job. When I lost my job, and I wasn't in a position to restart my asphalt work because I'd gotten rid. Anyway, so I lost my job, and I was hadn't taken the bar because my clerkship was supposed to be 2 years. So I wasn't going to take it until the end of my second year. I thought it was smart to work that summer doing asphalt work, but I hadn't taken the bar. So I was lost my job. I was unemployed. I didn't have a job lined up because I couldn't go back to the firm that I was supposed to be contacting 2 years from now about a clerkship, and I didn't have a firm job offer there. When they found out I was doing a 2-year clerkship, they're like, we're not sure we can commit. You can come back if it was only 1 year, but I said no, it's 2 years. So I didn't have a job in New York to go to. I didn't have the bar, and my I was supposed to get married, and my fiance left me. I was going to get married, like maybe I got fired in June, and it was too late to sign up for the bar, and then I didn't get fired. I quit, but I was going to get fired. And semantics don't really matter at that point. But my fiance left me. So she literally, when I lost my job, this guy's got nothing. It's not what I signed up for. And so she left me. And I was sitting there in this small town without any resources. And I had to decide, no bar exam. I had to decide what was I going to do? Like I had no choice. I was in a corner. My career, for all intents and purposes, looked like it was over. I'd gotten a clerkship after a very fast interview, like no more than 15, 20 minutes with the judge. So I didn't have time to really do anything wrong. It just went okay, and I got this clerkship, but no job. I'd lost my job, no bar exam, sitting in this small town where this town was not it was outside Detroit. It was very embarrassing. All the people in the courthouse knew I'd lost my job, or it's just not good. And I was very depressed, and my fiance left me. And so I was sitting there. I was like, what am I going to do? And it's embarrassing. And so I'm sitting there in the small town, and I was like, I have to figure out what I'm going to do. And so I realized that all these things I'd done wrong. I realized what I'd done wrong when I was interviewing. I started thinking about that. I was interviewed a lot of people. This judge interviewed a lot of people. It can be 10 or 15. So I watched what they did, and I watched what the good resumes looked like that were coming into him. And first I was really depressed. I didn't even smoke, but I bought cigarettes, and I just started smoking. And then it was funny, the courthouse back then people could smoke, the jurors, and then the courthouse, then they said, okay, now people can't smoke anymore. This is like 1996. And so they were taking off the thing to remove the smoke. It was a big filter machine. And I was like, oh, I'll take that, because I was thinking I was going to start to smoke. And so I had that in my apartment, which was funny. But anyway, so I was very depressed. And so I was like, what do I do? So the first week or two of this, I sat around smoking. I'd go buy a 6-pack of beer every night, maybe a 12-pack. I was probably out of control and just not feeling really badly about myself. And then I just popped up, and I was real, I need to fix this. So I wrote down everything I'd ever done wrong. I took out a notebook, and I wrote down every single thing I'd ever done wrong in an interview. I took a look at my resume. I wrote down every single thing I could think of that was wrong with my resume. I started reading some self-improvement books. I got interested in Anthony Robbins and other things, and started believing in myself and what I could do. And I thought about the interviews. I thought about what I'd done wrong in my cover letters to law firms before. My cover letters to law firms, when I was writing them when I was in law school, just applying, might have gone on for 3 or 4 pages. It was ridiculous. So I figured out what I'd done wrong with that. So I'm not going to bore you with all this, but I spent literally 3 or 4 days just journaling and writing things down and getting prompts to myself and figuring out what I could do, what I did wrong. And there's actually in the book Think and Grow Rich that I quoted you from the beginning of this, there's a list of questions at the back that you should ask yourself or to become a better person, an employee, whatever business. So I did all this for several days, and I figured out what I'd done wrong with all this stuff as much as I possibly could. I tried to take a look at myself. And then at the end of those days, I suddenly was able to I fixed my resume. It became very short. I didn't have a lot of descriptions, just names of employers and titles, and took off associations that had nothing to do with practicing law. I just would leave law review or Phi Beta Kappa, whatever. I made it very short. I fixed everything, which most attorneys never do with their resume. So I fixed that. I figured out what I need to do. I just thought about it from the employer standpoint. And then I figured out everything I'd done wrong in interviews. And then I figured out how to write a really good cover letter. It's very short. My cover letters turned into from these long things to it was a very simple line. It was crazy. I just wrote, I'm I'm interested in practicing whatever litigation at the very highest level. I'd very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. People got that and they were like, wow, this it's very short, it's direct. It's not something people need to read. So my resume I fixed, my cover letters I fixed. And then I decided I didn't want to work in New York because that's where my fiance was moving to. I didn't want to go back there. And so I decided I'm going to move to Los Angeles. I'd never been to California or Los Angeles, but I decided this is what I was going to do. And before I left the clerkship, I quit and then they're fired. And I spent a couple weeks there. I researched. It used to be you had to do this research, either a printed book like Martindale or the courthouse had access to Westlaw. So I printed up the names of every single decent law firm that was in Martindale that did litigation I could find in all of Los Angeles County. And I went and put all their addresses and things in a file. And back then you had discs for, and put them on the disc. And then I went to Staples and I bought $500 something of the best stationery I could find, envelopes, and I fixed my resume. I sent these letters out and short letters with a good resume and to hundreds of firms in LA and got lots and lots of interviews. And I didn't even go on them all, but I went to the best ones I could find. I went to Quinn, I went to all these different good firms and or top US firms that I got interviews at. I got better interviews and my grades in law school were good, but they weren't like the caliber to work at some of these firms, but I got interviews at them. And then when I went out in interviews, I got almost every job that I interviewed with. I knew what I did wrong. I knew I couldn't talk too much. I knew I had to ask questions. I knew that I had to be interested. I knew I had to make people like me and make eye contact and not and be very brief and direct. And I learned all these things. And I went from someone that had nothing to getting a $20,000 clerkship bonus, but back then would be like 50,000. I got someone to pay me while I study for the bar and pay me a bar stipend. I got someone to spend $15,000 moving all my stuff across the country. This is what I got and all this incredible stuff happened. And then, of course, my fiance was begging for me back and my whole life changed. And so just by figuring out, I had to fix it because if I didn't fix it, my odds were pretty limited. I could have become a contractor, but that is not something you can do very long, at least in the kind of contracting I was doing with asphalt outdoors. My whole life changed, but I decided I had to control what happened to me. And I did it when I started this business. It's you control what happens. And so think about that. I was like really messed up. I had no bar exam and fired from a clerkship, had never gotten jobs hardly when I interviewed, or maybe I went on 30 interviews, got one job because I'm doing anything wrong, but I fixed it because I had to, and I had to do what I could. So wherever you are right now is fixable. I can't imagine going to, and when I got interviewed in California with these firms, literally, I'd never been to California. I'd never stepped foot there. I'd never been to Los Angeles, none of this, but just decided I was going to do whatever it took. And so, what people to succeed, if you're looking for a job, it needs to be an all-consuming obsession. It needs to be incredibly important to you. It can't be something that you dabble in. It has to be something that you commit to fully. It can't be, you have to take it seriously. You have to do all the things that I'm talking to you about today, which is making sure that you fix everything. I do have a course. It's called Big Law Breakthrough. I think it's biglawbreakthrough.com, where you can learn about all the things that you can do to fix everything. If that's what you want to do, you can fix everything, which is great. Why wouldn't you want to fix everything and study this stuff? Or maybe you don't want to study it, but you can. All you need to do is commit. And this is what the difference is between people who succeed and people who remain stuck. So you have to, if you're looking for a job, you have to make it everything. It has to be like the most important, getting ahead needs to be the most important thing. If you want to have a career where you have business and stuff, that needs to be the most important thing. You need to take it extremely seriously. And what's so crazy about this long-haired candidate or the guy that mentioned he was gay 26 time on his resume was that they weren't doing everything within their power to get jobs. And you may think it's unfair, then you disagree with it, that someone with his hair past his buttocks couldn't get a job with a white shoe law firm, paying probably the equivalent of $400,000 a year now. But that's just what it is. And those are the rules. And society has rules. Society has rules like when I was talking to you about how poorly I was interviewing before. Like that's, those are rules. Like I was talking too much about myself. I was talking about the wrong things. I was emphasizing an asphalt business instead of legal experience. Those are rules. I was doing the wrong things. And so you may be doing the wrong things too. And you can either figure those out and use them to your advantage or fix them, or you can not fix them. It's up to you. But people also make, this is one of the dumbest mistakes I see too. So people that don't get jobs. So I see resumes not infrequently, but I would say at least once or twice a week for people that went to, again, like top law schools and then worked at top law firms. But then when you look at their resume, which is just absolutely incredible, they will have, this is very common, and I don't know why people think this is okay, but they will list, they'll say they have great experience at this amazing firm, and the first two or three lines of the resume will talk about this pro bono work that they did. It could be something like helped coffee farmers in Honduras petition for US sanctions to be something like that. And then they'll talk about, and then also I did some securities work, which might be like a line or two in their resume after that. There's very common that people do this. And then they're unemployed and they can't understand why they're not getting interviews. And maybe they lost their job because it was all about pro bono compared to their, who knows? But this sort of stuff happens very common, and you don't do that. You probably shouldn't even mention pro bono at all in your resume unless it's something that gave you great trial experience and you're a litigator. I don't know, but there's just rules. And so you have to obey the rules and you have to play the game. And this guy, like, why would you almost drive yourself to suicide because you refuse to cut your hair and take advantage of your skills that are incredible technical and education? And this is when things are fixable. My whole career, meaning my entire legal career, would have been, I probably would not be an attorney because I would have gone and I would have become an asphalt contractor, and becoming an asphalt contractor could have been a great job. Maybe I would done very well at it. I think I would have, but it's certainly not what I'm doing now and becoming an attorney. So I would have, had I not figured out the rules and I spent literally, and I got inspired. Here's how inspired I got. I would sit down, I got up in the morning and I might get up at 7:30 or whatever, 7, and I would start writing. Like, what did I do wrong? I'm literally trying to repackage every single interview I went on. So if I went on 50 interviews, I would try to remember each one. I would write down what I did wrong, what I could do better. I would take a look at my resume. I'm like, what's wrong with this? What would I think if I was someone trying to hire someone like me? And I would think about that and I write that. And I got inspired and I wrote for several days. I would start morning and journal and just keep going and just everything that I possibly could have done wrong. And then what I had to offer and how, and all these sorts of things. And so I just fixed it. If I didn't fix it again, my career would have been dead. And I would have been in Michigan, which is great, but it's not where I live now. All these things wouldn't have happened had I not fixed that. And if you don't fix things, then you're in trouble. And I fixed them, but imagine going on 30 interviews, getting one job just because you're lucky, and then going out and 20 interviews, let's say just 10, just and getting 8 out of 10. So anybody can do this, and you can fix your career if you really want to. And if you don't do this, you're not going to really experience the success you're entitled to. I would recommend, I'm not here to sell anything, but if you do go to the URL Big Law Breakthrough, you could watch what I'm talking about, the story that I've told you about, but in a lot of depth, and you don't have to pay anything to watch the video. And that hopefully can help you. But you can watch the story I've told you about what did I do to the resume and stuff in more detail. But the people who win in the legal profession are the ones that make the necessary adjustments and just keep fixing themselves, keep fixing the things you can. Like I talked about, for example, with an airplane taking off and making all these adjustments. So you can win if you fix these things. So most people believing being smart is about your IQ or how well you do in tests and things. But people that are unemployed and unsuccessful, there's so many of them are filled with exceptionally intelligent people. I talk to people all the time that were order the coif and things from top five law schools and nothing and don't have good careers. It's just nothing positive's happening to them. They're in a apartment in a bad part of Los Angeles and not doing, and so it's not just being intelligent. And again, there's nothing wrong with being in an apartment in a bad part of Los Angeles, but there is something wrong with that if you're in that position because you're not getting jobs or you're not able to hold on to jobs and things. So intelligence doesn't guarantee success. And the real level, the most important aspect of intelligence is your ability to take action and get the results you want from life. It's really just taking action is incredibly important. Like figuring out where you want to go, taking action, and then not stopping until you get those results. And I've been business partners and worked with Tony Robbins, my mentor, Chet Holmes, he wrote the book The Ultimate Sales Machine. He's no longer alive, incredibly successful. None of them went to college. Tony Robbins certainly didn't. He might have graduated from it. He's a billionaire. All these people have become, and again, Tony Robbins became a billionaire in the past 15 years, maybe. And then before that, he might have been not doing well financially. Maybe who knows what his net worth was, but maybe not that much. But took action, fixed things, and became. So people do these things, and they do them all through the quality of their mind and their motivation and what they're able to expect and demand from themselves. And you have to ask yourself, what's holding you back? Are you allowing people, again, to push you down or to define you in certain ways because of the mistakes you made or where you went to law school or because you didn't turn something in on time, because you didn't do well in law school, because you got fired from your job, because of who your parents are, where you live, who knows? But if you're immobilized, fear is going to stop you. Your whole progress in your life is just never going to be what it could be. And this is what most people do. Most people sell themselves short. Most people don't believe in themselves. Most people don't know how to overcome things. And so you may not have self-confidence. That self-confidence may prevent you from believing that things are going to change if you apply to 1,000 as opposed to 100 firms, or every job you can do, or looking for a better job, or looking in another market, or getting out of a relationship with a significant other that's making you unhappy and holding you back, or avoiding talking to your parents if they're a parent if they're not nice to you and hurting you, or jealousy, all these things immobilize people. And if you're not functioning at your highest and best state, then you should think about that. So if there are people that you're spending time with that are not making you feel good about yourself and that are draining you, then you should probably avoid them. You should be around people that help you feel good about yourself and do well. If you're looking for a job, you should be doing everything you possibly can to do whatever it takes and to not be immobilized and to not be held back. By the way, this is an important point, and I want to make sure you understand it. Anytime you set big goals for yourself, people are going to be threatened by that. So if you're at a certain job and you're setting big goals for yourself beyond what the partners there are doing or the other associates are doing, people will not make you feel good about yourself. They will laugh at you. They'll be threatened by it. They will not want you. They won't be nice to you, or you won't feel good about it. If you have goals that are going to potentially threaten your relationship with your significant other because they want you to be a certain type of thing, they will make you feel like you're not going to be able to do it. If you got goals that are going to take you away from your parents or make you better than your parents or a parent, they may hold you back. So people are going to mobilize you, and you are going to be around, everybody is, people that are going to mobilize you and want you to stay at a certain level when you're trying to become better. And you just have to pick up and not allow people like that to hold you back. And most people do. It's incredibly important. Think about that. You need to be around people that are supporting you becoming a better person and to get closer and closer to your goals. And this is what the most successful people do. I want you to function at the highest level you can in your job search and your career. If you don't think you're going where you could be, if you feel like you're stuck, then you're immobilized. And most people are. Most attorneys are immobilized. They're immobilized in terms of what they think they're capable of, the type of clients they represent, the type of firm they can work at, how much money they're making. All these sorts of things are immobilizing them. And it's interesting too. I talked a little bit about mass torts and stuff at the beginning, but think about some of these attorneys. They just make up these cases or they figure out these ways to do things and make hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements and they get things done and they're not, or they get into these incredible firms like I did that when their whole career looks like it's at a standstill or over and they give up because they won't make certain changes to themselves. They won't make changes to their resume. These changes to your resume, it's like I talked to you about earlier, saying you're gay 26 times in your resume. Nothing wrong with that. But again, that's emphasizing not your skills as an attorney, it's emphasizing something else, or putting pro bono in your resume, or not fixing your resume, not learning. If I was an attorney, by the way, I would learn every single thing, or a law student, I would learn every single thing that I could about putting together a good resume because 85% of resumes are a mess. Like they are hurting people. So if I was an attorney, I would watch my resume videos, like what's good about them. And my resume videos, again, I'm not telling you that I know everything, but I will tell you that I only get paid by law firms when when my candidates have the best resumes possible. So I do, it's millions of dollars at stake if someone does a good resume over time in multiple placements. So I need people to have good resumes. So I would watch my videos about resumes. I would watch cover letter videos if I have any. I don't know. I would get advice from other people, but people that actually have a stake in you getting a job. So not everybody does. You go to a resume company, they're not going to have a stake. They're just taking your money. They may build it up and put a big summary at the top, which you never should have, and make you feel good about yourself. And but taking you, but you need to get resume advice from people that have a stake in you getting a job. Maybe it's another recruiter than me. I don't care. But you need to make sure you're doing the right things and you need to make sure you create the circumstances you want. And if you don't, you need to create them. And this is what the most successful people do. The most successful people, when they become incredibly successful, they figure stuff out, they get it done, they make things up. And if you're not in the kind of job you want or you're looking for a job, your job search should be your ultimate priority. You should be doing everything you possibly can to move towards your goals. And this is what changes everything. And again, most people don't do this. Most people never get the results they could get. They allow other people to define them. They don't take risk. They don't work on their self-confidence. They don't fix the things they could. They don't constantly poke around for weakness. Another interesting point, and then some of the most successful people, I try to do this. I don't do it as much as I should because I'm so busy, but I really should be doing. The most successful people have coaches, and those coaches will poke holes in what they're trying to do and give them goals to do better and will keep them motivated and things and tell them what they're doing wrong and point things out that are negative and that they can fix and they will set goals and they will do all these sorts of things to become better people and to make sure that they're never satisfied and they're always setting better goals. And this is how people the most successful people, and I'll make a couple and then I'll get to the question, we'll take a break. But the most successful people are always setting goals for themselves. They're always talking to themselves like, this is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to improve. This is how I'm going to do this. And those sorts of people lead the people that aren't successful. I'll tell you one interesting thing. This is years ago. There was this attorney that I very much respect, and he asked me to talk to a couple of attorneys in this other office of his about what they were seeking in terms of another attorney. So I talked to these, there were a couple of attorneys in the small office of this great law firm, and these attorneys had amazing credentials. I talked to you about earlier, like top of their class, Harvard and Stanford and that sort of thing, a couple of them, and but they didn't have any business. And so I called them asking the type of attorneys they were looking at. They had done due diligence on me and then had found some blog article I'd written that was a funny article, but it was about, I don't know, it was colonic therapy or something. I thought it was a very funny article, but it was about that. And they just started talking about that and trying to rip into me. And so I got off the call and I called this guy who was a very successful attorney. And I thought it was interesting because what he said was, and he didn't have qualifications as good as these people. But he said these are the people that will always just sit there, wait for business to come for them. Will always have to get work from other people, and will never so they're always finding fault with people out there doing things, except for attorneys giving them work and so. And I thought it was interesting because you have people that are out there doing things and talking to themselves and with positive self-talk and doing really well, and then you have people that are just sitting around negative, criticizing others, but not achieving anything. And so, who are you? And so you need to think about that. All right, this is great. So I'll take a quick break just for a minute or two. I apologize that this was a long webinar, but I think the topic is really important. I would encourage everyone to ask questions. You can ask questions about this or any other stuff that we covered today, or just maybe not, but or any questions you have about your career, and I will stay as long as it takes to answer them. So I'll be back in just 30 seconds to a minute, and then we'll go to the questions. Thank you. All right. We'll get started. Questions. And I want to just everyone just commend you for taking the time to watch something like this. Very few attorneys and people do. And honestly, just one of these webinars, if it hits and you understand what I've talked about and you really absorb it, which I think you probably did, can help you. And just literally, just sometimes hearing one of these things can make just an amazing difference in what happens in your life. And I thought it was interesting once I was hearing Tony Robbins was telling a story, and it was, and again, this is someone that became a billionaire, and he was didn't have a place to live. He was living in his friend's basement, and he listened to this just recording by Jim Rohn, who's a I mean, he's interesting. He used to give self-improvement seminars and things, but he listened to this recording by Jim Rohn, and the Jim Rohn recording talked about how you need to just put all these positive messages into your mind and things. And so he took all these poster boards and he wrote down things like I'm a force for God to succeed, and like these different things he wrote on these big poster boards and marker, and then he hung them up all over the basement, like all these positive messages, and just to influence his mind, and it worked. And he caught fire and to start doing these seminars and things. And so sometimes if you just hear one of these things and then you study self-improvement and you listen to things like this and then other things that you can find. This is good because it's related to the legal profession, but a lot of stuff can be anybody. And there's lots of good information out there. But if you listen to this stuff, this is the difference between people that become successful most of the times and not. It's learning how to manage your mind and who you are and who you let me make sure I got the right document here. I hope I do. See here. I think I do. Okay, questions in here. Yeah. Okay, I think that's right. Document 5. Okay. Yeah. So this sort of information, if you listen to it and you absorb it and you understand, you're able to, give me 1 second here, I'll pull this thing up. Yeah, and you're able to inspire yourself. It just makes a huge difference. And this sort of information, the things I've talked about so far today, I have other self-improvement talks I can give, but this particular topic is incredibly important and one of the most important in terms of influencing who you are and what you become, because you can fix wherever you're at. You can use your mind to push yourself forward, to become a much better person, to become much more effective, to reach these huge heights of success. And you can do it not just with your career, but you can do it with your relationships and your how you talk to yourself and how you feel about yourself and your body image and all these different things. Anything that you think you want to get better at, you can. And it's so cool. I love this sort of stuff because there's so much that people can fix and become if you just trust yourself. So let me just see here. I'll call up all these questions. When you ask questions, by the way, I will, let me see, make sure. I'll edit copy. Okay, I'm gonna pause this for a second, the sharing the screen, because I'm gonna just do something. I want to make sure that I don't copy. I'm copying the questions. Yeah. So if you ask questions, which would be great, then I would recommend. I won't. If you're logged into Zoom, I won't show your name. So let me just see here. Second. So I'm just making sure everyone's name's out of this. There's some good questions about resumes too, it looks like. So just give me a second. Okay, see here. So what I'm doing right now is see here. Someone just said, funny, and I'll answer this question right now. Someone said, I thought this webinar was about job search paralysis. And yes, this was about job search paralysis because a lot of times people won't take the actions that they need to in order to really get to where they could be. Okay, so let's go to the Q&A. I'll start and I won't do them all at the same time. Okay, so this person says, give me one second. Oops, here. Give me a second. Okay, just one more second. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up the questions so I can also show them on the screen. Actually, I'm not going to do that. Let me give a second. Okay, so first question. So when you're a counsel at a big law firm and you transfer to a firm as a non-equity partner, should you ask for a better salary or other things, or should you be happy with the new partner title? So the difference between being a non-equity partner and having that title is a good thing compared to counsel. The reason that's good is because it's much easier to go out on the market and attract clients when you call yourself a partner as opposed to a counsel, because the title of partner has a lot more credibility in the market than counsel, whether it's to general counsels or people that own companies or to potential clients. So it's a much better title. You said, should you ask for a better salary or should you be happy with a new title? The law firm will pay you what they do. So you can certainly negotiate your salary, but you can use the title to hopefully much more dramatically increase your income if when you can by getting business and that sort of thing. And then so having that title is good, but at the same time you should be using it to try to develop business so you have a lot more potential to have a long-term career. And this is a good question because what a lot of people don't understand is that if people like this person is you may be obsessed with a title, and the title is important, but at the same time, as a attorney, the most important thing any attorney can do is to have their own business. And so how do you have your own business? You can either leave a firm and start your own business and law firm, or you can learn how to generate business. Because once you generate business and you have enough business, what happens is that law firm starts working for you. The law firm provides you with office space, it provides you with associates, it provides you with secretaries, does IT work and payroll and accounting, all these sorts of things. And then you can work to different firms will do it in a different way. They'll have different brands. And so your goal as an attorney is to develop a book of business so you can have your own business. And once you have your own business, you can practice as long as you want. You don't have to quit when you're 65. You can practice till you're 80 if you want. And having your own business is the most important thing. And so getting a title, yes, if that takes you towards getting more business, that's great. Now, people can work as counsel or non-equity partners forever if they're happy with it. But if it was me, to have more employment stability, meaning you don't have to worry about work slowing down at your firm and so forth, which happens and it's scary because some people aren't employed, or you could just get fired for whatever reason. If you have your own business, you're just in much better shape, and that's really important. Okay, let's see here. Next question. Get that. Sorry, actually, his first question. Okay, so what are the most common career paths for, oh, wait a minute, sorry. What's the risk of waiting too long to make a lateral move because I'm unsure of the market? Okay, that's a good question. So what does too long to make a lateral move mean? So when you're thinking about making a lateral move, there's a bunch of different calculuses that should go into it. This is actually a very important question. So when you say waiting too long to make a lateral move, so you have to decide if a lateral move even makes sense. And how do you know if a lateral move makes sense? The only way you know if a lateral move makes sense is if you have a couple different things to consider. And I could talk about this topic forever because I love this topic, but I'll upward mobility, mobility, etc. Or downward safer. So when people are thinking about making a lateral move, one of the things that people don't often think about that's a big deal is political capital. Political capital means, do you have really good relationships in your firm with people that are going to help you and those people are going to support you, or are those relationships negative? So sometimes if you move for an extra $25,000, a relatively low amount of money, if you have really good political capital and you're with people that will protect you and that like you, and you move to a place where that's uncertain, that's very risky. So does that make sense? So having political capital is meaning you have a brand, your brand's positive, people like you, you're getting along well, you're on a good track there, people have your back, or you're in the opposite. So political capital is a big one. And then the other one is upward mobility. Does a new firm offer some sort of, is it taking you closer to where you want to be? Is it giving you better training, larger clients, or the ability to generate clients when you might not have it? So you have to think about all those things. So moving firms doesn't always make sense. You have to think about, what are your goals? Are your goals to work in a law firm? Or are they what are your goals? And one thing that I would say is, if you're a young attorney, it is a good idea usually to try to get training at the best firm you can in your practice area. And that's really a good goal. And so if that's your goal, then working in a better firm is usually a good idea, or maybe not. But you have to think of those things, I think, are all very important. So give me one second. Okay, what are the most common career paths for attorneys leaving big law, and how do I know which one fits me? So there's a lot of paths for attorneys that leave big law. You have different paths. So you have in-house, I guess. You have government. Sorry, the government. You have other law firms. Okay, so I'll talk about each of these real briefly. These are the most common career paths. So a lot of people will go in-house. In-house is something that Big Law loves if you do, because they hope that you'll refer work to them. And Big Law functions and is successful to the extent that people go in-house and refer, and that client, or you become inside of a company and you start referring work back to the law firm you worked at or whatever. So law firms love it when people go in-house. They make it seem like a great thing inside the law firm. But in reality, there's some issues with going in-house. This is a very dangerous move, in my opinion, because this is not all, but most in-house jobs do not last more than a few years. It's not because they're bad. There's anything, do not last more than a few years. Sorry. Not last more than a few. And they're just terrifying. I see resumes coming in almost on a daily basis of people like losing their job at Amazon or whatever, that were in the in-house. And people are axed for just, who knows? They just get rid of people left and right. They change their budgets. They'll do other things. Who knows? But people lose their jobs because new general counsels come in and bring their own people, new CEOs come in, the company merges. It's extremely risky. These are extremely risky choices to go in-house. People go into the government. And when they go in-house, by the way, like if you're in a law firm right now in big law and you think it's difficult getting an in-house job now, think about how difficult it would be when you're coming from a company and you're unemployed and you've lost your job, because in-house attorneys are much people to work in-house are much more attractive when they're currently working in a law firm because their skills are fresher than they are when they go in-house to work in another place. So if you go in-house, that's a very risky career move that a lot of people make. It can work. People can do really well there. I was talking to a recruiter not too long ago that I know in New York, and I was having dinner with him, and he's just very happy. One of his candidates had gone in-house and the company had gone public or something, and his candidate had made $5 million, which is awesome. Really good things can happen, which is life changing, but it's rare. So people can also go to work in the government. That job is also can be good or bad, but you also don't have a lot of employment security there. Over the course of the past year, after Trump came into power and they started letting all these people go in the government, I saw thousands of people in the federal government that were losing their jobs and having all sorts of issues and unemployable for the most part, a lot of them in DC and things. So that can be risky. So you have those two choices. Those are things that can work, but in most cases, once you go to work in one of those you have it's risky. I wouldn't want to get a mortgage if I was in house or in government. It's extremely risky because you don't know what's going to happen. And you could lose your job suddenly, and then it can become very difficult. So if you leave big law, no one has to keep their stay in big law. As a matter of fact, you may actually be better off not staying in big law unless the lifestyle and that type of work works for you. But you can go to work in other law firms. At present, there's probably 150,000 plus law firms of more than five people in the country and people all over the country. And there's tons of law firms. They also start law firms. That's another thing. But there's law firms in every city. There are thousands of them in every part of the country. It's a huge business. If you have a law degree, you can work in another law firm or you can start your own law firm. And then if you have a law degree, why this is so smart is because it doesn't matter what you do. You could start off in trust and estates. I tell the story a lot, but I was looking at this office space in Malibu, and there was in the old courthouse in Malibu, which is from early 1900s. And in that old courthouse, there's this the old courtroom. And I was interested in renting it, but they were like, no, you can't. I was like, who's in it? And it was a guy that had graduated from a local law school, like Loyola or Southwestern, like 5 years previously, and had started his own trust and estates firm in Malibu with no one teaching him what to do or anything. And 5 years later, the woman that was showing he's always done so well. He just bought a $5 million house. And again, you can start your own law firm doing all sorts of things. You can do immigration, you can do family law, you can do that, or you can go to work for another law firm. And that's what I would do. The only reason, now you can do something else, a completely different profession. But if I'm assuming that you want to keep you're saying an attorney, you can go to work in all sorts of law firms of different sizes, and that's something you can do forever because you get clients, those clients will stick with you, or they will have matters in the future, and if you do a good job and you have a business, and a law firm's a business. But people used to do years ago, 50 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer than that, maybe 75. But what happened, but even after that, a law degree basically used to be you go to law school and you get a law degree, and then you take your law degree and you set up your business in whatever town you came from or wanted to work in. And that was it. You didn't go to, and your first big firm was Cravath that started after World War II when companies in the US grew because they didn't have a lot of competition. Other places in the world were rebuilding. But law firms didn't used to really have, people didn't used to go to work in law firms. You start their own business. And that's what a law degree is. It's basically a license to have a business. It's a business license. You apply, you take a test, and you get a business license. Okay, what should I do if fear of rejection is stopping me from applying to legal jobs and or internships as a law student? You shouldn't care. Why would you care? Everyone gets rejected. If you're a politician and you win an election, maybe 40% of the people are going to vote for someone else. Everyone gets rejected. Every business gets rejected. When I open my mailbox each day, there's all this solicitations from who knows, from people that want to give me a new roof to put tires on my car. People send out thousands of letters to your home every day, and they know that maybe they're lucky if one out of 10,000 people responds to their roofing ad because a roof costs $50,000 and maybe they'll make 20. Who knows? but you should never worry about getting rejected. And if you are getting rejected, maybe there's things that you can fix, but no one should care about getting rejected because that's just how it works. Everybody gets rejected. It's just how the legal profession works. Most attorneys, by the way, have very thick skin. You start getting rejected when you're in law school by almost every employer you apply to, unless you're certain types of attorneys, top law school, but a lot of rejection. So you should never worry about getting rejected. It's dumb because everyone gets rejected. Okay, give me 1 second. It's just part of being an attorney. So, and it's like that in every profession. If you're a actors, they go out and 100+ auditions, they drive all over LA and wait and sit in waiting rooms and then go in for 5 minutes and then do it again and again. And they might go out in 300 tryouts and get one job. And that job turns out to be something that's huge and changes their career in life. And just, you have to do everything. Key years in a law firm and senior associate. My turn for partnership is coming up in January 2027. If I have the chance to make a bid for a salaried and equity if I have a chance to make a bid for a salaried and equity partnership as well, should I go for equity directly? The book of business is important in equity, and I do have good chances for this, but I'm not sure. Also, should I stay at the firm if I'm not given either partnership? Culture is not great at this firm, but is a top 5 firm in my country, and the pay is also the highest for my years. Also, I'm 32, 3 years old with 2 toddlers. Okay, so that's great. So yes, if you are at the firm, been at the firm, and I don't know how long you've been there, but if you've been there that long and you are in competition for that, then that's great. I don't know. It depends on the firm you're at. And sometimes there are firms that you can become an equity partner without any business. I talk to people all the time. I was talking to this woman in New York a month or so ago, and she was at a big firm and had no business and was making a couple million, $2 or $3 million a year, and was made an equity partner there. And I think they only had one type of partnership, but she had no business, and it was interesting to me. But the point is that what you're talking about, book of business, is important to be an equity partner. So if I don't think a law firm, I don't know where you're at, but if they're able to make you an equity partner without any business, that's great. And I don't really see why you wouldn't want that. Many times people have to wait, and I don't need to tell you this, but sometimes people will be passed over for partnership multiple times, and then they will make partner. So that would have something to do with it. So it could take you 9 years, 10 years. And then should you leave if you're not given either? You should only leave if you feel like it's not realistic for you to become a partner in the long run. So meaning, is it real? Are you not likely to to become a partner because you obviously have a lot of political capital there, and the culture at other firms might not be any better. And so if you have people there that if you believe that it's possible based on everything you've done and all the work and the hours and things you put in, that could happen, then that's important. So you should try to use that political capital to help you. A couple points just in terms of talking to lots of associates and the become partner, people that didn't become partner, people that did become partner. You obviously, at this point, if you have 1 year, you may not have business yet, but you should start doing whatever you can to try to develop that and make that part of what you do. But in addition to that, you should be trying to bill as many hours as you can because many times that becomes the determinative factor of someone if they make you partner. It's just the reason being that your ability to get work from people shows your potential ability to get work from outside clients, but also how hard you're willing to work. So that's obviously very important. And then the final one would be having people that have the most business in the firm, like ridiculous amounts of business, like 50 million, whatever, 80 million, whatever, because if you're at a firm like that, there are probably people like that. Those are the people that you want to get close to and have sponsor you. So if you didn't make partner this year, then the following year, 2027, billing as many hours as you can over the course of the next year, but also trying to find someone who is a sponsor that will stick up for you. And there are people like in big, huge law firms, top 5 law firms, top 10 law firms all over the country that are equity partners and only became that because someone with a ton of business got behind them, will give them work. I don't know. Hopefully that helps. So let me just see here. Oh, let me get her. Okay. Next question. Wait a minute. Anyway, I'll answer this one first and the next one. How can I start a lawyer job search when I'm afraid my experience isn't good enough for better firms? You can certainly try to get into better firms. So if you don't think your experience is that great, but if you have experience in your practice area, whatever that practice area is, and you have a year or whatever enough of experience is, then you should, then there's no reason that you can't try to get into a better firm. The mistake people make on their resumes often is they think that everything is about their whatever their experience is. They think that they have to have perfect experience for whatever the job is. And ultimately, it's anybody that does one form of litigation can do other forms of litigation. Anybody that's a corporate attorney can usually figure themselves out and do other types of corporate work. It's not always the experience you have, it's what you do on your resume. So many times you don't want, if you're a corporate attorney, you don't give tons of detail if it's not relevant. Same thing with the litigator. You don't need to put tons of information. And so law firms typically will hire for different reasons, but ultimately they're going to hire, and I hate to say this, but they'll hire the people that they think first maybe have the best qualifications. But in addition to that, they'll also hire the people that they like and they feel the most comfortable with. So it's you can certainly try to get into better firms with your resume, but the mistake people make is you don't need to have a lot of information about your experience. You just, as long as you're in a certain practice area, most law firms realize that you can figure things out. And law firms usually, I hear experience sometimes, but most of the time I don't hear anything about experience when I'm talking to law firms about candidates. They will bring up experience, but most of the time they're concerned about where the person's coming from, the type of training they think they have, and does their CV kind of match the level of the firm that someone's at. So one example would be, so say you're at a good middle market firm, like not an Am Law 100 law firm or 200, but a good middle market firm, and then you apply to an Am Law 100 or 200 law firm. If your law firm has a good brand or people know that they do decent work, and you apply to a big firm, the law firms that's the big firm is really just thinking, okay, this person's experience is okay based on we if the person says they're a corporate mergers and acquisition attorney, we know that they probably have decent experience. It may not be working as big of matters as we do, but we know their experience is decent. This is an okay firm, and so they'll interview, and it doesn't matter. And then when they interview, if you come across as hungrier than people that are interviewing from big firms, and like you have less entitlement issues, then they might hire you, which happens all the time. So I wouldn't worry too much about this particular question. Okay, let me just see here. Let me see, but just to, I'll answer this question here. Okay, what are the best JD Advantage careers that offer good pay and work-life balance? Attorneys can go into anything. I've seen attorneys start ice cream parlors and do very well. The JD Advantage careers, so good pay and work-life balance. A lot of in-house jobs do that. A lot of government jobs do that. A recruiting, like what I do, can offer that for some people. There's just all sorts of positions that you can do, and you don't necessarily need to. Doesn't have anything to do with practicing law. It can be working in a company. I was interviewing a woman this afternoon that went to a top 50, or this morning went to a top 15 law school and has spent the past 12 years as a project manager with a company. And I thought her experience was pretty cool. And I was interviewing her for a potential project management job. And so there's all sorts of things you can do. A lot of times what's interesting is I've seen a lot of people from major US law firms or like employment attorneys go into HR instead of just companies. And there's all sorts of things you can do. So people respect people with law degrees in the market. And usually if you have a law degree, you think about things, you're more devoted many times to whatever it is you're doing. And people do better than people without law degrees and most employment environments. You can do anything. People become executives and inside of companies. And there's just millions of things you can do. But in terms of the best work-life balance, finding good work-life balance basically means you have to find someone that's willing to pay you as much as possible to not work hard. The best way to do that, in my opinion, is the government because you have the most security usually compared to in-house. So if it was me and that's what I wanted to do, I would go to work in the government. That's just what I would do. Now, what's very funny too is I'll just tell you I was reading an article and it was a while ago, it was like 4 years ago or 3 or 4 years ago about the starting salary for policemen in San Francisco is like $250,000 a year. It's something you can do with just a high school degree, which I thought was incredible. And they weren't even getting enough applicants for people that want to do it. It's $250,000 a year. And then my dad lives in a retirement community in Palm Springs or whatever. And there's people that are showing up there that are 55. They're retired from police force. They have homes in Palm Springs and they have them in Aspen. I'm not Aspen, but places in Colorado, multiple, and they're retired policemen. And so you can do a lot of stuff. I mean, I don't know if I want to be a policeman, but to think about a starting policeman in San Francisco makes $250,000 a year. That's pretty awesome. It's more than most attorneys make coming out of school. So there's all sorts of things you can do. Can you give me 1 second here? Okay, how can law firms identify, this is a quick question, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but I'm sorry, give me a second. How can law firms identify whether an attorney's prolonged job search reflects market conditions versus hesitation or fear of change? I don't know if how, yeah, a law firm may know if someone's been unemployed for a given length of time, then the law firm may conclude that they've been doing a prolonged job search and that it could reflect market conditions, or it could just reflect that the person isn't a good interviewer, isn't dedicated enough, or isn't applying to enough places. And usually what happens when people are doing prolonged job searches, they're making huge mistakes. And let me just tell you about the biggest mistake you can make in your job search. So let's say you're unemployed in Washington, D.C. as an attorney, and you're applying to other jobs in Washington, D.C. with your resume as an unemployed attorney. That's great. But think about it this way. Washington, D.C. is a huge market. There are way more attorneys than there are jobs. So if you're applying to jobs in Washington, D.C., and you're unemployed, you're competing against people that are employed. So if you're a law firm and you're confronted with you have five applicants, four who are employed and one who's unemployed, it's probably going to be more likely because there's fewer questions associated with this person. It's going to be very likely you're going to hire the person or interview the person that's employed versus unemployed. So if you're in Washington, D.C. and doing this, you can hope that you're the right fit for some job, and maybe you'll get a job. You probably will eventually. But if I was an attorney in Washington, D.C. and lost my job, I would apply to every single possible place I could that match what I do with an opening, without an opening. I would be applying to other markets. I'd be doing whatever I could because that's what you would do if I was representing someone as an attorney and I had to get them a job and I had 30 days to do, this is what I would do. So that's important. How does that reflect market conditions versus internal fear of change? I don't know it's fear of change. I just think a lot of times people aren't making the effort they need to in order to get something because everybody can get something. How do I negotiate a law firm job offer without? I actually like this question. This is a great question. I was actually thinking about this last night. So I had a candidate, this is pretty recently, like in the past 6 months, and he had done nothing but work at had his own thing since he had graduated from law school. And he was 4 or 5 years out. He had never worked for a law firm and wanted me to help him find a law firm job. So I got him one job offer. It was stupid because he was a transactional attorney. He was doing trust and estates, and the firm offered him a job being a litigator. And he's like, "Why would I take that?" And so that's okay. He didn't take it, and the job, and I wouldn't have taken it either. I didn't apply him to be a litigator. The firm just interviewed him for that. But then I got him another job offer as a trust and estates attorney with a small firm paying $250,000 a year. And the firm was going to pay me for finding him quite a bit of money, like 60,000. But he came back and was like, I want to negotiate this. Like, what do I need to do could I get a little bit more? Can they give me 275 and all this stuff? And he never gotten an offer from a law firm in his practice area ever. And this firm was going to train him. He was just all sorts of advantages. And so he went back and he wanted to negotiate it. And I told him, I don't think that's a good idea. This has been very hard. You've applied to hundreds of firms, and this is the only place you're able to get. And so he decided he was going to go back and negotiate it. And I told him I didn't think it was a good idea. And he went back, I went back and I tried to negotiate 250, 275, and a few other things. And the law firm came back and was like, see ya, no, we're not interested in him anymore. And yeah, so they pulled the offer. And of course, I lost a bunch of money. And so did the firm, so did he. And then he wasn't able, he wasn't able to get interest from other firms again. But what had happened is after this happened, I said, we need to set up a call with you and the head of this firm and figure out what happened. And then the guy that pulled the offer was basically said to him, listen, this is what's working against you. You've never worked in a law firm. And second, you don't even speak Spanish, which is what most of our clients, half of our clients are. So you have all these things going against you. And why would you come back and try to do this with a sense of entitlement and so forth? And so that's what happened. And so we try to negotiate it. So I've seen people, so many people this year or last year, lose job offers by trying to negotiate them. I don't know why law firms are acting this way. They didn't used to like this, but I've seen that happen. Now, that when this happens, it's usually with smaller firms or firms that don't have as good of a brand. Because if you go back and you try to negotiate with a major law firm, they'll be like some maybe they'll half the time or maybe more, they'll actually negotiate. If you say, I want moving expenses, they'll say, we'll give you 10. You come back and say, can I have 15? They'll say, okay, we'll meet you in the middle. They'll negotiate. But a lot of these smaller to mid-sized firms take it very personally. I had one guy, I told this example before, but it was something like he was making $250,000 a year in Silicon Valley, and then he got a offer from a firm paying $400,000 a year, but it was about an hour from his house or an hour and a half each way in traffic. And so he came back to them and said, this, and again, life changing, $250,000 to $400,000 a year offer. He came back and he said, can I work at home one day a week? Because it's going to take, the drive's 3 hours a day and I'm happy. And they came back and they were just like, boom, no, we're pulling the offer. And because you should have known that everyone works in the office 5 days a week. So yes, you have to be very careful about negotiating offers. And it doesn't always go your way with smaller to middle market firms. It depends. Sometimes it can, but it's so risky. It's just, I've never seen it that bad. And that's what's happening a lot. Yeah. So give me 1 second here. Okay, how do I reach out to law school alumni for legal job advice without feeling awkward or intrusive? So you typically don't you can reach out to for legal job advice. People do that in different ways. So you can reach out to people in your market that went to your law school in your practice area, or you can reach out to people in other markets in your practice area. And you don't ask them for jobs. You just basically say, hey, can I have 20 minutes of your time or a half hour of your time in Zoom, or maybe they'll meet in the office, which is even better, to just ask you some questions about the legal market, just informational interview to get some information. And that's people will talk to you. It's great. So they will, if you go that and you ask it that way and you're not asking for a job, they will often talk to you. And it's very smart. And people like to help other people, especially people that are proactive like that. And they will often, sometimes those people will hire you. Often they'll call their friends for you because people love to give references like that. So the idea is, I went to this law school. I also went here. Could I ask you a few questions about the legal market in whatever city you want to work in? Or can I ask you a few questions about what firms you think I should be trying to work for in my practice area? But those sorts of things. And people, it's very difficult for a law school alumni from your law school, especially if you went to a smaller law school. If you went to Harvard or something and you want to get advice about the Chicago legal market from another attorney at a major law firm in Chicago, that's probably not going to go anywhere. But if you went to a smaller law school, or if you went to Harvard Law School and you want to work in St. Louis or something, or Boise, Idaho, and there's another Harvard, and that's what then you should definitely reach out to people. But, or if you went to, I don't know, USC in Los Angeles and you want to work in Cincinnati or something, there's maybe one or two Cincinnati people that went to it's things like that's the best way. And it works. It's smart. Okay, let me see here. Next one. Okay, as far as drafting resume bullets, I understand it'll vary widely from practice to practice, but do you have any tips for drafting, particular ways to organize your narrative? General versus bullet descriptions, drafted negotiated long document versus representing client and read structuring. Okay, so there's a couple of different questions you're asking here. This is a very good question. So what I recommend everyone do, you have to use ChatGPT or whatever AI program you want. You have to use this for your resume now. I hate to say this, but it's absolutely true. You have to use AI for your resume now because it's so much more effective. You can do it yourself, but you're going to get usually much better results from doing that. You're asking two questions here. So you're asking a question about your resume, and then you're also, you didn't mean to, and you probably don't even know this, but you're asking a question about a transaction sheet. So let me just answer this question. And this is extremely important. If you're listening to this right now and just whatever, surfing the internet or something while listening to this, you can still that, but I hope you listen to what I'm saying. So the best resumes, all you need to do in your resume to get a job and to be effective, your resume needs to speak to your practice area and nothing else. And if you're applying for a job in that practice, nothing else. So you need to look like an expert in whatever, an expert committed to whatever that is. That's it. So you don't need to, if you do corporate law and you're proud that you've done a little bit of litigation and some trademarks, like you are out of your mind if you're going to write litigation on your resume or trademarks. Your resume should only talk about corporate. And if your job prior to your corporate job was working in a law firm doing workers' compensation, you don't say anything about that job. You just say, I worked as this firm as an associate, whatever. You don't emphasize it. So your resume needs to speak to your resume, your practice area, nothing else. You need to remove anything from your resume that doesn't make you look strong in your practice area because what happens is people look at something. You can look at a car. You look inside a Bentley and you see the way everything's put together and all the leather and everything. And then you look inside I don't know, a Kia, you're going to immediately get the sense that one of these things is awesome and the other's not. And that doesn't mean that I'm not talking about the level of attorneys. I'm talking about the scent of something. Like, how does it, what is it, what impression does it give you? So if you want to be a corporate generalist, someone needs to look at your resume and think this is all about corporate. You don't have, I was on the diversity law journal and if you're on the corporate law journal, that's great. But you take everything off that doesn't have anything to do. You don't have pro bono on there. You don't have associations, the Christian Students Association. You don't have anything on there you just remove everything. You don't need to say anything about law school. You take everything off your resume that doesn't have anything to do with your practice area and make yourself look focused on your practice area. That's the most important thing. People that do that get 10 times more interviews or 5 times, many more times. You make things look focused on your practice area and then you remove information that is irrelevant. So you don't talk about pro bono, you don't talk about jobs in the summer that had nothing to do with practice. People do stuff all the time. They'll have, oh, I worked at this immigrants' rights group my first year, and then the second year I did more immigrants work for this association, and then now I'm a litigation attorney at this firm. No, you don't talk about, you remove those summer jobs, or you just say I was you want people to read your resume and think only one thing. This person is this person is that. That's because you're just a product. You're selling a product. And why would a product talk about things that have nothing to do with what it does? Your resume needs to just talk about your practice here and what you do and your expertise and nothing else. And then it needs to remove details that make you look stupid. So if you're a litigation attorney and you say, I wrote memos and I responded to a discovery request and I sat in a deposition, litigators all do the same thing. So you don't need to have a lot of detail. One of the best resumes I ever saw was this guy. It was very funny. He went to Harvard Law School and he was like one of the top 10 students in his class, whatever, a Sears Prize winner. And then he'd gone to Stanford or something before that. All he did was he had where he went to school, that he got this award from the top 5 student at Harvard. Then he was at this firm and he was a corporate associate. That's all it said, nothing else. And then he'd been a summer there, so it said that. And then the guy could hardly fit anything on his resume. Because he just made it so sparse. It was incredibly effective because all he was doing was drawing attention to because optionally is a corporate associate. That's it. So you don't need to have a lot of detail and your resume needs to speak just about your practice area, nothing else. You should run it through ChatGPT and say, make this look like a whatever, personal injury resume or a corporate generalist resume or whatever the resume, just tell them and eliminate everything that doesn't have anything to do with that. And you will get incredible results compared to whatever it is you're doing. You don't need to draw attention. When you start taking your attention away from things that have anything to do with your what you're doing, that confuses your audience and people won't hire you. So if you were looking to buy let's say you're looking to buy a $100,000 Mercedes. You went to look at one Mercedes and you saw the $100,000 Mercedes and it was just like a normal $100,000 Mercedes. Then you went to another and then you looked at another Mercedes and it had a built-in toaster oven. And on the side was printed free to bet, like on the side of that resume, at the side of that car, free to bet, built-in toaster oven. And then inside, it had a bunch of stickers on it, Christians for whatever, something like that. You would think, what the hell's why would I want to buy this Mercedes with a toaster oven with free to bet painted on the side and then a bumper sticker that says free Christians? Like that has nothing to do with your desire to have a nice car driving somewhere. So the Mercedes with nothing in it is the one that's going to win, the regular Mercedes, because it's whatever the model is and it looks like it. So that's what people do is they dress up their resume to have any things to do with nothing what they're doing and no one hires them. Just know you wouldn't buy that Mercedes. So you're a product too. Why would you do that? And the second part of your question is, and so ChatGPT can clean it up for you or any XI, whatever. And then if you're a corporate attorney, you can have a transaction sheet just talking about the different types of transactions you did. People, law firms love that. And best transactional attorneys, whether it's real estate or corporate or it looks like you're real estate, they will keep track of every transaction they do and they'll be very proud of it and they'll write it down and it becomes part of their identity as an attorney. So you should make sure that if you're corporate or real estate, that you can always have a transaction sheet and that can help you. A second. Okay. If an attorney has had a negative experience with a firm, should the attorney work on resolving the issue with the firm before applying for other positions? If so, how can the attorney do that? Okay, so every attorney makes mistakes, especially as a young attorney. When you're green, you will make mistakes. Every attorney will be in a position where they feel like other people don't like them, where they have to overcome it. Every attorney has issues. And so yes, if you've had a negative experience with a firm, you should definitely work on resolving the issue. Maybe you do need to apply to other positions if you're worried you're going to lose your job. And by the way, everybody should always be monitoring the market. You're a product, so you should always be monitoring the market and seeing what's going on. This is a site I own, but it's called Law Crossing. And this is a good site just because it goes and it visits every job page of every law firm and company that we can find and then puts the jobs on there. That it also will go and do that for in-house jobs and government jobs and things. And these are jobs that aren't necessarily going to be advertised in Indeed and LinkedIn because those things cost money, but you should also be using Indeed and LinkedIn and all these different sites to find jobs. Law Crossing's helpful or better in a lot of ways because it's showing you unadvertised jobs. Again, we're talking about, let's take a market like, I don't know, Las Vegas. Las Vegas, there's probably at least 5,000 law firms there of different sizes. And out of those 5,000, maybe 1,000 have career sites, but they're not all advertising their jobs on Indeed and LinkedIn. So if we find those jobs, they're unadvertised jobs. So Indeed, same thing. Like these are LinkedIn, these are jobs that are getting a lot of applicants. So anytime you can find unadvertised jobs that are just on career sites, that helps you. But you should be using all of these sources to keep your eye in the market because you're a product. So if you were a trader, trading securities, or you would watch the market too. So everybody has to always watch the market. So you should always know what's out there and your marketability and how many different places there are you could work. It's very important. You should always be watching. You should spend at least 10 or 15 minutes a day on these different sites, understanding what's in the market. But yes, if you do have a negative experience at a firm, if it looks like you're going to get fired, you should start looking for a job immediately and try to fix the issue. But you always want people to think positively of you and the rest of your career. So everywhere you go, you want to have a good brand because if you have a good brand, then those people may refer work to you in the future. They will when your name's brought up, they will say positive things about you, which you want instead of being neutral. So you always want to try to have the brand you can with different people. Okay, so I had a total knee replacement a while ago, and the rehabilitation is not going well. I typically use a walker to get around or two canes. It does not present well. In interviews, I try to downplay that my rehab is going well, but I suspect I'm not getting offers because of my infirmity. Any advice? Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know if that's helping you or not, but a law firms are not all law firms, but law firms are cautious many times about hiring people. that have health issues because what they're afraid of is they're afraid that person will start and then all of a sudden, very quickly, they will go on some sort of disability or whatever, and then the law firm is in a pro is difficult for the law firm because first of all, the law firm may have to hire someone else to do the work if you're out, and if they have to hire someone else to do the work, they can't fire you for being out. So they have this two costs. They have the person that they had to replace you with to get the work done, and then they have you coming back, and that's could be an added expense. They don't want to get sued, so it can present issues. So yeah, it may not present well, but the smartest thing I would do if I was in that position is I would just be right up front. I would say I had knee replacement because of I love to play basketball or whatever it is, and my I'm going to be in this walker for the next 2 months, and you can laugh about it and make jokes and things, and or whatever 6 months, and I think that's okay. But yeah, people have to be careful sometimes with that sort of information because it can hurt you. But it's not just think about it if you were a business person, like if you were interviewing someone to, I don't know, take care of your kids or be a cook or something, and the person showed up in a wheelchair, how would that present as opposed to someone that didn't? It's what it is. Okay, let's see. You mentioned getting a coach to help with your job search. Okay, let me just see here. See. Job search, where do you find one? There's all sorts of places you can find coaches. They're out there all the time. There's good coaches and there's bad coaches. A lot of coaches will become a coach just by taking a course or something. Typically, the best coaches are going to have a history of different people that they've helped and references, and they've been in the industry for a long time. There's coaches that coach just attorneys. Some of them are okay, some of them aren't. You have to find someone that you're just comfortable with. And many times they're just people you would never expect. Could be a basketball coach or something, or it's just they're all over. But I agree, coaches are important. People have paid me to be a coach before. I used to have clients doing that, but I do it a lot. But I found myself thinking more about my clients than I would think about my business. And so and that's good. That's what you want in a coach. But there's yeah, getting a coach is, and you don't have to spend a lot of money. A good one could be $200 an hour, even 250, or some maybe, yeah, and they don't have to be expensive. And even sometimes if you want a therapist or something like that, those functions as coaches because they allow you to talk about yourself, and then by talking about yourself, you can reach conclusions about yourself and things. That can be helpful. Okay, next one. Let me see. I don't want to. Okay, let me see. Oops, sorry. And thank you everyone for these questions. This is great. Most of the time, there's not as many questions as there are today. And this topic wasn't necessarily about just practicing law entirely. So I'm glad that there's questions. Okay, I don't want to practice law, but I've always wanted to have my own business. I had my own business in college with friends, and that was some of the best times of my life. Okay, that's absolutely true. I had the same experience with my own business in college. I'm afraid to take the leap and leave the legal field. How do you know it's time for you to leave the practice of law? First of all, you can have your own business practicing law by representing clients and building up a business doing that. You can even, being a personal injury attorney, for example, is more about marketing and bringing in clients because 95% of the cases settle than it is about being an attorney. I mean, it's funny, but it's marketing a lot of it. There's all these different businesses you can start as an attorney. It doesn't necessarily have to be outside of the legal profession, but that's one option. If I was going to start my own business, and I went into this just because I literally was exposed to it when I quit my job as an attorney, and they were like, "Oh, you can't quit your job because if you want to go to work in another big firm, it'd be difficult for them to hire you if you're unemployed. So you should talk to recruiters." And this just completely interested me. I don't know why. It just clicked, and nothing had ever really clicked like that. So sometimes you'll find things. If you had your own business friends in college, what about that clicked? Is it that type of work? What is it? But one thing I will say to you is, and this is important, and this is some of the mistakes that I've made in my career, in my life. So if I'd stayed an asphalt contractor, I never would have been exposed to what I'm doing now. I wouldn't have had the same type of career, meaning influencing people like you, and it'd be much different. So the far longer you push yourself, the harder, bigger firms you try to get into, the more you get exposed to people that big companies or whatever other types of companies, the more successful you're going to be. You're often limiting yourself if you just start your own business immediately. Your business should hopefully be something that you have a lot of passion in. And then the longer you and the more sophisticated people you expose yourself to, the better off you're going to be. Meaning your success a lot of times is going to happen when by learning to be around other successful people. So you should seek out things you're interested in. And then when you find things you're interested in, you should try to find people that are doing that, learn from them. And that's yeah. But I knew, why did I know it was time for me to, oh, you asked me, how did I know it was time for me to practice law? I'm sorry, I wasn't answer your question. So I knew it was time for me to practice law because I was very unhappy. I would sit there and I would actually think about business ideas and different things I'd want to do. I felt it was limiting. I was in a firm that was not doing well, and at least in the office I was in, and people were unhappy. I liked the other associates, but it wasn't a friendly place. I didn't really get it. I felt I wasn't going to be able to get ahead there. The firm I'd started at, Quinn Emanuel, was a great place, but they didn't want you to have business because they had so much work. And it's not that they thought there was something wrong with that, but they needed people to do the work. So I figured I could sit there working 2,500, 3,000 hours a year, but I would never have my own business. So then I moved to another firm and I was able to bring in lots of business. Back then I had 250, 300,000, which would be like 600,000 maybe as a third year associate. So I did bring in business, but at the same time, I wasn't happy doing the work. I didn't like it. I didn't like the type of work. I didn't like fighting with other attorneys. There's so much stuff I didn't like about it. And I felt it was very isolating. So that's how I realized, and I'd had my own business. So I decided when I was exposed to this in the midst of looking for a job, it's something that I really, but yeah, being unhappy practicing law, not wanting to go into work, not necessarily liking all the people I was working with, feeling limited, like I couldn't control my future and things could happen to me. Having been exposed to two different styles of practicing law, one at a very entrepreneurial firm, the other at not, all these different things, not being excited about having my own clients in business, like even though I should have been not that excited about it, that said everything right there. It just wasn't for me. But that doesn't mean I made the right decision because had I stuck with it, I think there's a lot of things I would have liked about it, but I just wasn't happy. Yeah. So if you're not happy and you can't, and if you change different firms and different practice in different settings, then you shouldn't be doing it. And especially if you had your own business. If you had your own business and practicing law with a law firm is your own business. But if you have business, but if it's not something that you necessarily want to do or you can't see yourself doing it, then that's not good. Let me see here. What's going on here? Did I copy all these questions? Looks like I did, but I'm going to work. These are questions that came up after since. Okay, next question. What are the best books, resources, or programs for attorneys looking to develop business and have grow a client base? So there's lots of courses online. So you can courses online. There's lots of courses online about, I think, there's are courses, there's YouTube videos, there's articles about how to develop business. I've written lots of articles about it. There's lots and lots of resources about how to develop business. And I think that, and if I was an attorney, that's exactly what I would do is and I did that when I was an attorney. I sought out every piece of advice I could. And so that's what I would do. So you can watch these videos. You can also watch what attorneys are doing in your own firm and in other firms. You can read about it. You can do all these, anything. If you want the information, you can find it. And most of it would be free. I think there's courses about it. If you are in a certain practice area, like whatever the practice area is, not all of them, but there's different things you can sign up for, like portals that have courses and other things. So that's what I would do if I was an attorney. I would be watching all that stuff. And I've written a lot about it, but you should get information from a lot of different sources. Let's see. I'm a 3L. I have an offer from a small law firm after graduation, working on M&A. Wow. Let me see, primarily buy side, lower mid-market deals. What should I do to strengthen my prospects of my long-term goals to work in a large law firm? That's great. So if you have an offer for a small firm doing M&A, that's fantastic. If it was me and I had an offer like that, I would work in the firm I'm at for 2 or 3 years. I would work as hard as I could. I would get exposed to as many things as I could. I would become very dedicated to learning about M&A and what I could do in that practice area. I would learn everything I possibly could and be the best attorney I could. I would impress the people I was working with. I wouldn't be concerned about looking for another job. And then I would sit there working on that for doing the best job I could for 2 or 3 years. After 2 or 3 years of getting in that experience, I probably would send my resume to some recruiters, and I would, as many recruiters that sounded decent in my town that I could find, or your market or other markets. Then I would talk to those recruiters and figure out what they think about my marketability. Then I might sit on it and think about that some more. And then I might apply to a bunch of places on my own or selectively apply to some large law firms and see what happens. I think if you get in, the thing is, if you get experience in M&A, then that's great, even with smaller firms, because a lot of that experience is going to be translatable into to other firms, including large ones. And that's large law firms love hiring people from smaller law firms because especially as laterals, because they're hungrier, they have something to prove, they want to do a good job, they have a chip on their shoulder, they might have got a job with the best firm possible. So I think that's amazing. I think that that you got an offer like that and you should make the most of it. It's a great opportunity. But I would just throw myself into it. I would become the absolute best I could. And then I would get hungry and want to work on bigger deals and bigger firms. And the other thing too about learning M&A in a smaller firm, that's invaluable because that's you can learn how to bring in smaller clients and M&A attorneys will often work on smaller clients and then those smaller clients become bigger clients and pretty soon they have a big book of business. I know one of the most successful attorneys I know started off at a middle market firm doing M&A and then those clients he went out and developed business and then he ended up working at a huge New York law firm you never would have imagined because those clients became big clients. Okay, do the salary negotiations crater because the candidate overestimates his or her value, leverage, bargaining position, etc.? Well, salary negotiations crater with smaller to mid-market firms many times because the law firm knows that if you're trying to negotiate something, that you're probably never going to be happy there based on what they pay, and they don't necessarily have a future for you at the maybe the higher salary, or they don't want to they don't want to have someone there that is not going to be happy with whatever they're paying. That's one reason salary negotiations crater, but the law firm will often think this person is too much work. I can hire someone that's going to want the job more. This person doesn't have the negotiation leverage they think. If this person gets the amount of money that they're asking for, we're going to be paying more than other people similarly situated. So there's all sorts of reasons that law firms do that. But in a lot of times, law firms have had experiences that if people are trying to negotiate their salary right now, and this is for smaller to mid-market firms mostly, then they're never going to be happy and they're going to leave, and it's not a good use of our time. We want someone that appreciates what we're offering, that's what that is. Now, I want to make an incredibly important point, and this is something that everyone should understand, and I want to make sure you understand it because this is actually a very important point. A lot of people, so this last question we had about someone talking about going to work at a middle market firm or a smaller firm doing M&A, I think if I was an attorney, like, then someone was willing to do that, give me that job and give me that training that would enable me to go to larger firms or bring in smaller middle market clients, that's invaluable. That's huge. That's the person that's starting off in a small law firm doing small M&A deals. That's something you can pick up that experience and move anywhere in the country to small markets, middle market, and take that experience, learn how to bring in doing small M&A deals cost effectively. That's something you spend 2 or 3 years, 4 years, 5 years learning that. Those are skills you can have the rest of your life to bring in career. And whereas people that go to huge law firms may never get that experience, so they'll only work in the largest companies, and that's limiting and less entrepreneurial. But the point is, I want to make this is incredibly important. So your first 5 years of practice, if you don't get experience in your practice area, whatever after that, is all about training. It has nothing to do with money. Like, why do people think about money? Because you don't come out of law school, you don't get trained in law school how to do whatever your practice area is. It's ridiculous. As the law school, you learn about contracts and torts, whatever, but it has constitutional law, but it has nothing to do with your ultimate, like, training you. But it takes about, to learn any practice area, it takes about 5 years. So you get a job, you have one job paying 150,000, another paying 300,000. The one paying 150,000 is training you, like just giving you this incredible training in how to do, I don't know, defending doctors against professional liability. And that's all you do for 5 years. After 5 years, you're going to be very good and you're going to know everything there is about defending doctors from professional liability. And maybe you're only making 100,000 and then someone in a major law firm is making four, but that person is just getting this kind of whatever training in general litigation, and it's not anything specific. So that training doing professional liability might actually be incredible because you can take that and it's very easy to get doctors are all over his clients. You're getting all the so it's the training, not the money that you're getting. So that's the most important thing from your first several years out of law school is the training. It's not about the money. The money is comes later. So it comes later after you get the training. It doesn't, you don't have to get all the money up front. One of the dumbest mistakes, and this is, again, it's not a mistake, but it's one of the dumbest things that happens, is attorneys go to work in major law firms out of law school, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, thinking that I'm making all this money. And they are going to get training, and it's good to get training in large law firms, but many times they're front loading their compensation. So, meaning they're making all this money early in their career, but they're probably not going to make it later because they're going to go in house, they're never going to get business, and so they're front loading this compensation. Whereas a person that goes to a smaller law firm and getting the training might actually have a longer term career, like the person doing professional liability for doctors would have. Everything's about the training. It's not about the money. So it may cost you in the short run, if you make 100,000 versus 300,000 for 5 years, it could cost you $1 million, but your career will last 50 plus years. And so 10% of that, whatever it is, isn't that important. So I don't think that you should worry too much about money at the start of your career. I think people do, and it's okay. But this person doing M&A, this great example, might be making 150,000 where they could be making 300,000 in a larger firm, but they're going to get all this training. They're going to become very proficient. They're going to be excited about doing larger transactions. They're going to learn how smaller transactions do, and they're going to all this training that someone in a large law firm isn't necessarily going to have, and that maybe enable them to get business later and all these great things. So sometimes not going to the best law school, not getting the best job is actually really a good thing that happened to you. You might not realize it, but it may. Okay, so this question. I agree with negotiating with smaller law firms when they get offended. What about negotiating travel expenses? I have a DC law firm looking at a New York candidate who doesn't want to relocate but is willing to travel once a month to DC. I feel like the firm should pay. They are pushing back and saying they have to set up jurisdiction to hire her. Have you heard of New York candidates paying their travel expenses for the commute? Ideally, they want someone 3 days in the DC office. I said she can go once a month. Plus, I feel like when you can't find DC talent and we have to hire outside, that's on the company to foot the bill. And where are the exceptions to the desired hybrid schedule has to be considered. Can you speak on your experience on this with remote work when the rest of the firm is hybrid? Okay, let me just make sure I understand this question. Sorry, I think it's from a recruiter, so I just want to make sure. Yes. So your question is, this is a good question. So you say you have a DC firm looking at a New York candidate that doesn't want to relocate, but that is willing to travel once a month to Washington, DC. And have I heard of New York candidates paying their travel expenses for the commute? Ideally, they want someone 3 days in DC office. I think in that particular candidates, and there, I think it's perfectly acceptable for someone to ask for travel expenses if they want them to travel there, especially if it's a decent sized firm. And I don't know how expensive the travel from New York to Washington, D.C. is, but yes, they should pay the travel expenses. And ideally, they should also pay for the hotel and that sort of thing if they want them to travel there. Now, if it's a supply and demand issue, like the firm in New York could, or the firm in DC could find someone there to do that type of work, then you probably don't have as much negotiation leverage. I would be very careful about that. Now, because you're a recruiter, it sounds the way I usually negotiate these things is, and this is how you do it without pissing off the firm as a recruiter. So what I would do is I would go to the firm and I would basically say, hey, my candidate didn't ask for this, but in similar situations, I've seen firms do this. Can you see if you can do this so I can go back to the candidate and tell them I got a win for them or something? So I make it about me, not about the candidate. So if the firm, so that if the firm decides that if the firm thinks the candidate's doing it, then the candidate, then they're mad at the candidate, they can pull the offer. But if they think you're doing it, then they can't get mad at the candidate. And so I will go to firms and I'll say, hey, I'm just trying to get this. And I've actually done this successfully a couple times over the past couple months because I used to do it like the candidate wants this. And if I did the candidate wants this, then the firm is mad at the candidate and then pull the offer. But if I do, hey, I'm trying to do what I can to go back to my candidate and say I got a win or something, can you do this? Then the firm is doesn't get pissed off. And then often they'll do what I ask and they'll say sure, or they'll say no. And then it's not on the candidate. And I had a firm. The reason I learned that is I did that and I was trying to negotiate for my candidate. This is recently in the past couple months. And the guy suddenly I was talking to started giving me this pushback and getting pissed. And I said, hey, wait a minute, this isn't them asking, this is me. And then he said, then nice try, I think. So that's how that ended up resolving itself. Okay, let me see if there's anything else here. Okay, yeah, I think we got all the questions. And thank you everyone for being on this. I hope this was helpful. This is an incredibly important topic. I will make sure that everyone receives the slide deck. So we'll make sure that we send that. And if we don't, just email us, but you should get that, a copy of that. And have a great rest of your week. And I think it's great that you watched this webinar because I think it really just sometimes just one of these things, just hearing one of these messages and absorbing it. Like I'm the one that's in control of what I do. I have to set my own goals. No one's going to help me get that except for me. I can't accept my own circumstances. All these circumstances others put in front of me. I need to be in control of everything. I need to fix. I need to be proactive. All these things. If you learn that, it's life changing. It's just huge. Yeah. But I've had instances, it's not, people will say, oh, I watched these webinars and all this stuff has helped. But I'll have instances sometimes, not every week and not even every couple of weeks, but someone will come back and they'll message me on LinkedIn or something. They'll say, hey, I learned this one thing from you, and I watched something 4 or 5 years ago, and just this one thing. And it totally changed like the whole direction of my life and career. So sometimes, and it doesn't have to be from me. You can watch it from some self-improvement person, it doesn't matter. But sometimes if you learn just one thing, it can make a big difference. So I'd encourage you to keep watching these webinars and to come back and ask questions. And yeah, because this stuff can help you. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your week. Thanks.